And tragically behind me here, a man who was apparently abiding by the shelter-in-place guidelines was tragically killed in his own home when a large tree fell onto his brick home here in Humboldt. You could see some of the police tape up and some of the law enforcement response. A short while ago, I talked to a woman here who says she's terrified now because there's a lot of mature trees here in this area that we see swaying. And a short while ago, I spoke to the acting governor here in Texas, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick. He is trying to warn people, especially people in the northeastern part of Texas, that this storm is not over.
You're in the pathway of a Cat 1 storm that has 70, 80, 90 mile an hour wind plus 100 plus gust and 8 to 10 inches of rain. That's a major event, and that's what's happened in the greater Houston area.
And we've been driving around the greater Houston area today. Earlier, we had whiteout conditions, strong wind, heavy downpours. We saw, several people pushing their cars out of the flash flood zones. The area we're in now, not so much flooding, but a very strong wind event. And, of course, the Lieutenant Governor, the acting governor, urging people to use caution, especially considering what has happened here in this area where a man has tragically lost his life. Sandra.
Our best to all those in the community. That's a lot happening there. We'll check back in soon. Matt, thank you.
We are anticipating a briefing from the White House any moment now as support dwindles for President Biden within his own party. It is up to Democrats now to promote a possible replacement as the party props up Vice President Harris as a potential successor. Let's bring in Leo Terrell, Fox News contributor and a civil rights attorney. You're in a good position to talk about this, Leo, because at one point in your life you were a Democrat, and President Biden is doing all he can to try to reassure Democrats that he's the right person for the job. In a letter that was sent to congressional Democrats, he said in part, quote, "I want you to know that despite all the speculation in the press and elsewhere, I am firmly committed to staying in this race, to running this race to the end and beating Donald Trump." It would seem he is not going to go gently into that good night.
You're absolutely right. And thanks for having me, John. First of all, he will never beat Donald Trump. I don't think any Democrat will. But here's the problem. Joe Biden has been asked twice, will you take a cognitive test? George Stephanopoulos asked him, and they asked him on Morning Joe. He won't answer that question. He redirects and talks about his past. It's about the future. He's incompetent. He needs to resign, and he's going to resign. I think the only choice that the Democrats have, John, is Kamala Harris. She's incompetent, unlikable, low in the polls, but she has an ace in the hole, her skin color. If they pick anyone over her, that party will implode because they play identity politics. And because of her skin color, they have no other choice but to move her up if Joe Biden steps down.
All right. So in terms of replacing Joe Biden on the ticket, short of invoking the 25th Amendment or a wholesale revolt among delegates at the convention who are pledged to Biden but don't necessarily have to vote for him, there would seem to be no way to shove him aside.
Well, I'll tell you right now, Joe Biden holds the key. He has the delegates. That's why that letter was a wolf letter. He basically said, challenge me, you will lose. So he has to step down. And the only way he's going to step down, John, is money. The money has to dry up. And that, again, leaves Kamala Harris in the cat seat because all the money that has been collected has Joe Biden's name and Kamala Harris. She controls the purse strings. So the Democrats have no other choice but to pick her. And, again, the race card is in play because the Democrats play identity politics. Kamala Harris has to be the choice.
You know, I think under the rules, there are ways that he could be replaced and she not be on the ticket. But one of the people that's talked about is Gavin Newsom. Here's what he said about the prospect of becoming the nominee. Listen here.
If it comes to an open convention, will you run?
No, I mean it's not even.
Absolutely not.
My election, and that's not even. It's to me, it's the hypothetical that gets in the way of progress in terms of promoting this candidacy. And I think it's exactly where Trump and everyone. That's a legit question, but it's exactly where the other party wants us to be, is having this internal fight, and I think it's extraordinarily unhelpful.
So he says no, he wouldn't put his name into nomination if it were to be an open convention. He could say that now, but do you think if his name came up in the middle of August, he'd say no?
No, he wouldn't. Let me think about that. Absolutely not. John, let me be very clear. I live in California. Gavin Newsom has destroyed California. The American people do not want Gavin Newsom to destroy America. Gavin Newsom would lose to Donald Trump worse than Kamala Harris because he has destroyed California. There's nothing good about this state. By the way, I'm leaving because of people like Gavin Newsom. This state has hit rock bottom.
So let me ask you this, Leon. I know it's a hypothetical. But if Biden were to announce that he is not going to run and it's an open convention, what would that look like? You know, I think back to 1968 after Lyndon Johnson said that he wasn't going to run again. And that was a Rhymes with Hit show in Chicago. Would this be about the same?
Absolutely, and worse, because you have Chicago again, just like LBJ in 1968, which was total chaotic. You would have a just mayhem in Chicago in the convention. Besides what's going on in the convention, outside there's going to be rampant crime going on. The city would be totally destroyed. But I will simply tell you this. There's only two options, Kamala Harris and who her vice president would be. It would have to be Gretchen Whitmer because they got to win Michigan. They cannot pick Josh Shapiro as VP because Democrats are anti-Israel, pro-Hamas. So it's really just Gretchen and Kamala, in my opinion.
Well, nobody wants to see crime and chaos outside the convention, but inside the convention, it would be must-see TV for sure. Leo, great to get your thoughts on this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
All right, Sandra?
All right, the Trump and Biden campaigns vying for the youth vote ahead of November. But what is the youngest voting bloc saying about the oldest presidential candidates? Our panel, made up of Gen Z and millennial voters, will join us live next. Plus this.
The Chinese have been telling the world, oh, America is in irreversible decline. Look at Joe Biden. He's the embodiment of decline. Iran is saying the same thing.
President Biden preparing to host the leaders of more than 30 nations at a jam-packed NATO summit. How will those leaders view him on the world stage? We'll get the read from John Ratcliffe just ahead. And, the White House briefing delayed to 2 o'clock, as Jim Nabors might say. Surprise, surprise, surprise.
My psoriasis was all over.
Then psoriatic arthritis. Who knew they could be connected? For me, Cosentyx works on both.
Cosentyx helps real people find clear skin, and in psoriatic arthritis can mean less joint pain and help stop further joint damage. Serious allergic reactions, severe skin reactions that look like eczema, and an increased risk of infections, some fatal, have occurred. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms, had a vaccine or plan to, or if IBD symptoms develop or worsen.
It's only a matter of time until your check engine light comes on, or worse yet, your car needs repair. That could mean a big surprise auto repair bill. Those repairs are more expensive than ever. A new engine can be over $5,000. A new transmission over $4,000. That's why it's so important you call CarShield today. CarShield is the #1 auto protection company.
Party call on him to exit the 2024 race. We expect to hear directly from the White House when the White House press briefing begins. It is expected any moment now, already pushed back by a half hour. But we're at the new time now. Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm Sandra Smith in New York. And John, great to have you back today.
Good to be back here. Could be some fireworks there in the Brady briefing room. I'm John Roberts in Washington, and this is America Reports. President Biden is trying to rally his party behind him as he enters a critical week for his campaign. This morning, he sent a letter to House Democrats declining to step aside. And just minutes later, he appeared on MSNBC with that same firm message. Listen here.
I have a neurological test every single day. Try sitting behind this desk and making these decisions. You know it. Both of you know it. They know it. I'm not bad at what I do. And now, it doesn't mean I never make a mistake. I do. But I'm making those decisions. I'm not going to explain any more about what I should or shouldn't do. I am running. I am running.
All right. Former Clinton advisor Mark Penn will join us with his reaction and analysis in moments.
But first to Jillian Turner. She is live at the White House where we await the briefing. And Jillian, some Democrats say this could well be Kamala Harris's moment.
They are indeed saying that, John. What President Biden is trying to do now with his feet to the fire is refocus attention away from his mental and his physical health and instead put it on his rival, former President Trump. Take a listen.
He's just a liar, and he hasn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days, was down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friends.
Biden's also ignoring recent polling that shows him slipping further behind Trump since last week's debate, telling congressional Democrats in that letter you mentioned today, quote, I feel a deep obligation to the faith and the trust of the voters of the Democratic Party have placed in me to run this year. It was their decision to make, not the press, not the pundits, not the big donors, the voters, and the voters alone decide the nominee of the Democratic Party. Meanwhile, new White House documents obtained by Axios reveal the president's advance team gives him detailed stage directions for how to get from backstage to the podium at his events. This in the wake of Biden appearing confused on stage in front of 50+ million people just last week.
I did events in North Carolina. I did events in Georgia. Did events like this today. Large crowds, overwhelming response, no slipping. And so I just had a bad night. I don't know why.
Well, that bad night is now prompting some of Biden's closest allies to muse aloud about his running mate.
I think the vice president would be a phenomenal president. I think she has the experience, the judgment, the leadership ability to be an extraordinary president. I think she very well could win overwhelmingly.
President Biden does have a big week. The NATO summit kicks off here in Washington tomorrow. As you know, world leaders, heads of state, heads of government from around the world are convening here. Interestingly, the White House or the campaign is sending Vice President Kamala Harris out of town. While it all goes down, she is not going to be here for NATO at all, John.
All right, Jillian Turner for us at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Again, the briefing got pushed back to 4 minutes ago. We'll see how much longer it gets pushed back. Jillian, thank you. Sandra?
Let's bring in Democratic pollster Mark Penn now, Stagwell CEO and former Clinton advisor. Mark, thanks for joining us. First up, your reaction to President Biden this morning. He called into MSNBC. It was a phoner. And here he is calling on Democrats, come challenge me at the convention. Listen.
Remember all this talk about how I don't have the black support? Come on, give me a break. Come with me. Watch. I'm getting so frustrated by the elites. Now, I'm not talking about you guys, but about the elites in the party who they know so much more. But if any of these guys don't think I should run against me, go ahead, announce the president. Challenge me at the convention.
All over the place at times, at some points even yelling, but saying I'm getting so frustrated. What was your reaction when you heard that?
Well, as you know, a house divided itself against itself cannot stand, and the president knows that, and he has said quite clearly, and I keep telling people this, just listen to what he's saying. He's running, he's got the nomination, he won the primary, he's got the delegates, and that's the end of it. And either the party is going to get in line or commit suicide trying to undo his nomination, because he's not going anywhere. And nobody's going to be taking the 25th Amendment, and nobody's taking him out of office. None of those things are happening. And so he's the nominee, and I think they're making that clear. And I don't think that anyone in the party has any power to change that.
So this is a question directly to you, Mark, not to the party, but to you. Do you want to see him stay in this race?
Oh, look, I'm an observer. Do I think that the Democratic Party would do better switching horses in midstream and seeming chaotic? I'm not sure that that's a very safe bet. They have their nominee. They've had their process. I think if he weren't the nominee, the only person who could or should be the nominee would be the vice president, because that's the constitutional order of things. And the party should, I think, live up to that. I think having a free-for-all of the convention with convention delegates, oh my God, that would be the biggest nightmare that any party could imagine.
Okay, so thank you for that. Mark, this is more from President Biden in that new interview this morning, saying and insisting he is the guy for the job. Listen.
I am not going anywhere. I wouldn't be running if I didn't absolutely believe that I am the best candidate to beat Donald Trump in 2024. We had a Democratic nominating process where the voters spoke clearly. I won 14 million of those votes, et cetera. So I not only believe that from the beginning, but I wanted to reassert it and demonstrate that it's true.
Thoughts?
Again, he's saying it like it is.
Okay.
I've never seen anything. Look, these polls are within single digits. They're not in double digits. When I was working with Clinton against Dole and we were achieving double digits, nobody told Dole, you're too old and have to get out of the seat and can't be the nominee. President Biden is the nominee. He is going to run unless he came out. Look, he could have gone and met with his family and met with advisors during 4th of July and come back and said, you know what, I've really thought about this. I'm not going to run. I'm going to do an orderly transition to my vice president. I'll give her the support. That is not what happened here. The opposite happened. He said, I'm running, I'm president, and I'm not going to look, do the political analysis. If he withdrew now, he would be seen as a loser who withdrew because he wasn't competent. The worst thing that could happen to him is he loses. So therefore, between losing and losing, the only way he could possibly win is if he stays as the nominee. Yeah. And who knows what can happen in an election against Donald Trump. Well, I think that's the calculus he made, and that's the way this has come out.
One quick final question on that. I mean, from you, we're hearing who can win, who can lose. And, you know, American voters, both Republicans and Democrats, have shown concern about, can he lead? You know, and at what point do Democrats question very seriously, as we are hearing behind the scenes more and more are, I mean, is this the right thing for the country, even if he can win?
Well, look, I think politicians are going to be politicians. They're going to look at the polls. If people thought the economy was going great and that the world situation was going great, nobody would care. The truth is, most voters think the economy and the country are going in the wrong direction. The president's job ratings are low, and therefore, right now, he's behind in the polls. That's what's generating all this concern.
Mark, always appreciate when you can join us. Thank you very much. Good to have you on.
Thank you.
All right, John?
Sandra, thank you. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen, now in the full screen, that we're still awaiting the White House briefing. John Kirby will be there, so we expect that he is going to lay out the plan ahead for the NATO conference, which starts here in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. For more on that and other topics, let's bring in the former Director of National Intelligence and a visiting fellow at the Heritage Foundation, John Ratcliffe. Good to see you. Thanks very much for coming by.
Great to be with you, John. Good to see you.
So, regardless of how Ukraine unfolded, Biden seemed to do a pretty good job of holding NATO members together on Ukraine. But there's no question, I think, that in the couple of years since that conflict started, he's lost a step or two. Is he still the right guy to be driving the bus on NATO? Was he ever?
Well, I think what I would say is, part of the success in terms of NATO responding in Ukraine was Donald Trump's success. Donald Trump required NATO members to shoulder the load and to step up their commitment and to meet that. And I think that better prepared NATO. Honestly, I think that Joe Biden has done a terrible job with respect to Ukraine, and I think President Trump is right in saying that this never would have happened. I mean, this is an aftermath of the debacle in Afghanistan. His failure to deter Putin in the first place is really, he's managed a situation of his own creation.
I remember the coverage because I was covering Trump back then for the White House, and all the members of NATO were saying, "Oh, well, this is too much," and all the press were writing about how Trump was strong-arming NATO. In the meantime, the Secretary General of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, is saying this is great.
Exactly.
Getting all this money. Here's what Politico wrote about Biden and NATO. They said, quote, "American allies fear Biden is finished and can't beat Trump. They have reacted to Biden's recent debate performance with dismay and fear that Biden may be too frail to defeat Trump and lead a global superpower." Now, clearly this is cast in the idea that NATO doesn't want Trump back as president. But are they correct in what they said about Biden is too frail to lead a global superpower?
I do think that the premise of that whole article is false. Look, I've met with foreign leaders from 5 different continents in the last 7 months at their request, and they don't express fear about Trump returning. They've expressed to me hope, and they tie that to their own national security posture. They need a strong America to have their back, and they don't have that. So I would submit to you that Joe Biden's not the right guy, but he's never been the right guy. I mean, John, what we've seen and what we've been talking about for the last week and a half since this debate are things that people like you and me have seen for the last 3.5 years. This didn't just start. The only reason that we're talking about it now is because it happened on live TV in front of an audience of 50 million people. And I think that's really, there wasn't an ability to spin it or to ignore it altogether, which is largely what happened. But if you really look at this over the last 3.5 years, the debacle in Afghanistan was early on. The failure to deter war in Eastern Europe with Ukraine, funding essentially a war in the Middle East by rebuilding an Iranian economy. All of those are Biden's accomplishments. So, I think that this mess in Ukraine is one of his own making. He was never the right person to handle it, and I think that those leaders, speaking honestly and candidly, would tell you that they hope for a return of Donald Trump to the presidency, so there's a strong America.
And in light of all that, President Xi is eyeing Taiwan to see when he could potentially pull the trigger on that. But here's what Biden said about NATO and China in an interview with ABC last week. Listen here.
Who's going to be able to hold NATO together like me? Who's going to be able to be in a position where I'm able to keep the Pacific Basin in a position where we're at least checkmating China now?
Checkmating China. Let's do a fact check on that. China's military buildup continues unabated. They've added $300 billion to the defense budget. Their defense budget now, Heritage, estimates it to be $710.6 billion, which is not far away from the U.S. So how in any way, shape, or form is he checkmating China?
Well, he's completely wrong, in making that statement. I mean, you left out the point about 24,000 Chinese nationals entering our southern border this past year when 342...
Well, we only have so much time.
Yeah. So, from the very beginning, the first meeting in Anchorage, Biden administration officials have been pushed around by China to a spy balloon, transcontinental voyage across the country, to their repeated aggression throughout the Indo-Pacific over the last 3.5 years. The only way this reverses is if President Trump returns to the White House and there's finally a strong commander-in-chief that President Xi either respects or fears. I don't care which one. But in this case, he doesn't have that with regard to President Biden. I think that's clear from the results of the last 3.5 years.
Real quick final question. You're one of the authors of a new Heritage report saying that China needs to be held accountable for COVID-19. Don't have time to go through the whole report now, but it lays out a series of measures that this White House could implement to hold China accountable, including sanctions and some other things. Do you really expect Biden would ever do that?
I don't, but I don't think it's too late if it's a President Trump. The American president needs to confront President Xi and the Chinese government over accountability for 28 million deaths worldwide, and as we calculated, $18 trillion in damages just to the U.S. economy, in addition to the 1.1 million lives lost. And by the way, this was a bipartisan commission making nonpartisan recommendations, Republicans and Democrats alike. And I think it's long past due to hold China accountable for the worst pandemic of our lifetime.
John, great to talk to you. Thank you for dropping by.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it.
You bet.
Sandra?
All right, White House press briefing should start any moment now. We are going to go there live when it begins. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Veteran homeowner.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Happy Monday. It's going to be a great week. I have very long things, long toppers at the top. Just warning you all, no falling asleep, please. Okay, so we've gotten more strong economic news in recent days. On Friday, our economy created more than 200,000 jobs last month. Under President Biden's leadership, we have now created a total of 15.7 million jobs over the last 3.5 years. Yesterday, a record 3 million travelers were screened at airports, a sign that our economy is strong and Americans are back on the road for the summer in record numbers. Speaking of which, last week we sold 1 million barrels of gasoline to help lower gas prices ahead of the 4th of July, which saw the lowest gas prices in 3 years. And today, a new report from the Economic Innovation Group highlighted what the New York Times called a, quote, a remarkable comeback under President Biden. That report found that communities that have been lifted behind struggled under the last administration, what the Times called a particularly grim stretch under Donald Trump. But those communities are coming back under President Biden, with jobs growing more than 4 times faster than in the previous 4 years. Investments spurred by the president's Investing in America agenda are benefiting previously left behind communities That's just some of the economic progress happening under President Biden. Watch out for more news in the coming days. Exciting. And next, I want to share highlights from the president's recent schedule, as well as looking ahead to the next 2 weeks. So over the last 10 days, President Biden has been hitting the road and meeting directly with the American people, as well as continuing his job as leader of the country. In the 2 days after the debate, he met with supporters in Atlanta, Raleigh, New York, and New Jersey. Last week, he delivered remarks on the Supreme Court, visited the D.C. Emergency Operations Center for a briefing on extreme weather events, hosted a Medal of Honor ceremony, and joined the First Lady for a 4th of July barbecue with active duty military service members and their families. Throughout the week, the president also spoke with leaders of the UK, United Kingdom, Israel, and the Republic of South Africa. On Friday, the president traveled to Madison, Wisconsin for a campaign rally. On Sunday, just yesterday, he held numerous events across Pennsylvania with elected officials, including Governor Shapiro, Senator Fetterman, and Congresswoman Madeleine Dean. He participated in interviews, including joining Morning Joe just this morning. And throughout, the president has engaged with elected leaders, including members of Congress, governors, and local officials. This week, President Biden will speak to national labor leaders of AFL-CIO, host the NATO summit to show the unprecedented strength of our alliance, hold a press conference, a big boy press conference, according to Justin Sink from Bloomberg, who's not here, but Josh, you are here, I see you. So that will happen on Thursday, and travel to Michigan on Friday for a campaign event. And next week, he will travel to Texas and Las Vegas. On July 15th, he will commemorate the 60th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act at the LBJ Presidential Library in Austin, Texas. He will highlight the Biden-Harris administration's progress advancing civil rights and his vision to bring America together. On July 16th, he will address the 115th NAACP National Convention in Las Vegas, emphasizing the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to advancing racial justice and equity for all Americans, including Black Americans. On July 17th, he will speak to the UNODOS annual conference, where he will underline the Biden-Harris administration's historic accomplishments, including lowering prescription drug costs for America's seniors, lowering the Latino uninsured rate, and creating a Latino small business boom. And finally, I just mentioned the U.S. is going to be hosting the 75th summit, the NATO summit, right here in the United States, obviously in Washington, D.C. this week. NATO is the most powerful and capable alliance in the world, and President Biden is proud, very proud, to have worked to strengthen it and also expand it. So with that, the Admiral from the National Security Council is here to take your questions on that.
I do have a few things to get through, so I'll ask you to bear with me. As Karine mentioned, the President's looking forward to hosting the leaders from 38 different countries this week in Washington for a historic summit to mark the 75th anniversary of the NATO summit. This will obviously include the leaders of all our NATO allies, as well as NATO partners, including Ukraine, Japan, New Zealand, and the Republic of Korea. Before we discuss the schedule, I just want to take a minute to discuss the context in which NATO leaders will be gathering this week. For 75 years, NATO has served a vital role in protecting the American people and in making the world a less dangerous place. NATO is the strongest defensive alliance in history, and today it is bigger, stronger, better resourced, and more united than ever before, in large part due to President Biden's leadership over the past 3 years. He's worked hard to expand the alliance by welcoming 2 new members, Sweden and Finland, and will officially welcome in Sweden this week. He has spent countless hours rallying the alliance in 2021 and 2022 to build a global coalition to respond to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and to provide indispensable support to that country. And I'll get more on that in just a second. The President has also strongly encouraged greater partnerships between the NATO alliance and friendly nations around the world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific, as you will see. And the President knows that the global threats and challenges that we all face, including from authoritarian actors and terrorist organizations, are inextricably linked. He has also encouraged our NATO allies to join him in making significant investments in our mutual defense and deterrence capabilities. Now, when the Biden-Harris administration took office, only 9 NATO allies were spending at least 2% of their gross domestic product on defense. 2% was the Wales pledge. That was the goal that every member of the alliance had swore that they would get to. Today, a record 23 NATO allies are at or above the minimum level of 2% of GDP on defense spending. More than twice as many as in 2020, and nearly 8 times higher than when the allies first set that 2% benchmark a decade ago. Now, just quickly turning to the schedule. Tomorrow evening, President Biden will welcome NATO leaders, and he and Dr. Biden will host a 75th anniversary commemoration event at the Mellon Auditorium. That is the site I think you all know when the NATO treaty was formally signed in 1949. On Wednesday, the President will hold his first bilateral meeting with the new Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer, here at the White House. The President will also meet with the 32 members of the alliance at the Convention Center. And then later that evening, he and Dr. Biden will host NATO leaders for a dinner again here at the White House. On Thursday morning, NATO will hold a meeting with the EU and with NATO's Indo-Pacific partners, that's Australia, Japan, the Republic of Korea, and New Zealand, to deepen our cooperation. And then on Thursday afternoon, there'll be a meeting of the NATO-Ukraine Council, after which the President will host an event with President Zelensky and nearly 24 of our allies and partners who have signed bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, just as the President did, as you saw in Italy a week or so ago. After that, the President will hold a press conference, I guess a big boy press conference is what we're calling it, and take some questions from y'all. Now, we're working to also set up some additional meetings, bilateral meetings. The only 2 that I can speak to right now are with the UK Prime Minister and President Zelensky, but I have no doubt there'll be additional bilats. And as we get more fidelity on those, we'll let you know. Finally, as customary for summits the United States hosts, there'll be a Leaders, Spouses, and Partners program hosted by Dr. Biden. Now, if I could just quickly turn to Ukraine, because back to the context for what this meeting's all about, I think it's important to just do a quick update here what the situation is on the ground. Since the passage of the supplemental in April, the President has authorized 7 security packages to help Ukraine, including 5 drawdowns of munitions and equipment. The resumption of that U.S. aid has made a significant impact on the battlefield. Instead of the nightmare scenarios that were predicted several months ago about what we could see heading into the NATO summit, we've seen the situation stabilize. Ukrainian forces have successfully stopped Russia's attack north of Kharkiv, denying Russia the ability to take that city and limiting Russian gains to areas just across the border. The Ukrainians have held the line in Chaziv Yar. They've held fast east of Pokrovsk, hardening their defenses and ensuring that Russia will not break through. And they've halted Russian attacks in Zaporizhia. Throughout these last 3 months, the Russians have attacked relentlessly across all those fronts. And the price that they have paid for the few meters that they have gained here and there has been extensive. Heavy casualties, destroyed equipment, disrupted supply lines, degraded morale. The people of Ukraine have yet again demonstrated that when supplied and when supported by the international community in the United States, they can hold off the largest, though certainly not, I think is clearly evident, the most capable army in Europe. Their success is not just limited to the front. Ukraine has put U.S.-provided ATACMS, the long-range strike missiles, to good use in Crimea, destroying Russian surface-to-air missile systems, commandos, airfields. They sunk the last cruise missile-capable warship in the port of Sevastopol, and the Russian Black Sea Fleet has now fled Crimea in response. While it's been heartening to see Ukraine hold on in this critical period, we should not forget the grim reality. Russia continues to bombard frontline towns with massive and low-accuracy glide bombs and sending missiles at Ukrainian cities, including over just the past weekend, where they hit a hospital, a children's hospital. Russia has ramped up its campaign against Ukrainian electrical generation, depriving the civilian population of power and attempting to set the conditions to punish them over the fall and the winter. To strengthen Ukraine's air defenses and to help Ukraine protect its cities and its grid, the United States and several of our allies will have several big announcements at this week's summit. And the NATO alliance will announce significant new steps to strengthen its military and political partnership with Ukraine to help Ukraine continue to defend themselves today and to deter Russian aggression well into the future. These elements, taken together with bilateral support, are part of a bridge to Ukraine's NATO membership. Together, the Washington summit will send a strong signal to Mr. Putin that if he thinks he can outlast the coalition of countries that are supporting Ukraine, he's dead wrong again. As President Biden has said himself, Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia, for free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness.
Thanks, Ben. Good.
Thanks, John. You mentioned the context of this summit this week. It's also the first time the president interacted with these world leaders since that the disastrous debate against former President Trump 10 days or so ago, where the president struggled to confront the former president on all sorts of things. What is the president's, does the president feel how does he plan to reassure American allies in NATO that he's up for the job now when he couldn't confront Trump on stage then?
I think the question presupposes the notion that they need to be reassured of American leadership and President Biden's commitment, and I don't believe that's the case. We're not picking up any signs of that from our allies at all, quite the contrary. The conversations that we're having with them in advance, they're excited about this summit, they're excited about the possibilities and the things that we're going to be doing together, specifically to help Ukraine.
So you've seen zero, there have been stories in multiple outlets on both sides of the Atlantic over the last several days with questions from European leaders about the president's capacity to lead the United States. Are you just denying that?
I'm not aware of any such conversations that have been had, certainly none with us and here at the White House and with our staff. We're looking forward to it. I want to go back to what I said at the beginning. In the last 3 years, rather than browbeaten and insulting and demeaning allies, this president has invested in allies and partnerships. And when he took office, what I said, only nine allies had reached the 2% level. Now 23. That's not by accident. That's because of leadership. That's because of constant stewardship of the alliance and other partnerships around the world. The president's record speaks for itself, and the allies and the non-NATO friends and partners that are coming as well, they know that. They wouldn't be coming. New Zealand, Japan, South Korea, to a NATO summit if they didn't believe in American leadership and how important it is, and if they didn't believe that President Biden takes that responsibility extremely seriously.
Admiral, good to see you. On the point about European countries, NATO members boosting their defense spending, that was something, though, that was a big concern of the last president. It's part of the reason many of them are boosting their funding.
And it was a concern of the president before the last president. As you recall, President Obama said the same thing. This pledge goes back a decade or so. But the numbers speak for themselves, Ed. I mean, rather than browbeating and yelling and screaming and complaining and whining about it, President Biden invested in this alliance. And just the last 3.5 years now, more than double the number of allies have reached that 2%.
Two questions on the fallout from the debate. Have you, in your meetings with him, ever seen him appear similarly to the way he did on debate night?
Look, I'm a spokesman.
And you're in a lot of meetings with him.
I am. The last thing I'm going to do is sit here and talk about every meeting I've had with the president. What I can tell you is, what I saw in that debate is not reflective of the man and the leader and the commander-in-chief that I have spent many, many hours with over the last 2.5 years in terms of the specificity of the way he probes, the questions he asks. Heck, just this morning, he was asking me questions about the situation on the European continent that I couldn't answer, and I told him I had to get back to him.
When he met with governors last week, he suggested he'd like to curtail events that begin after 8 p.m. at night, just because he'd rather focus on resting and doesn't want to have a long day. In your understanding of things, has the National Security Council ever withheld information from him he should have known late at night out of concern he might not be able to process it?
No.
Russia has bombed Ukraine's largest children's hospital, as you noted. Do you believe the timing of these strikes is meant to send a message to NATO ahead of this week's summit?
It's hard to draw a line, Mary, to that. I mean, sadly, this is par for the course for Mr. Putin to hit civilian infrastructure, and he doesn't care whether he's hitting hospitals or residential buildings. I can't draw a line that this is some sort of message. But look, I mean, as I said, what you're going to see over the course of the week is a very set of strong signals and messages to Mr. Putin that he can't wait NATO out, can't wait the United States out, that we're going to continue to support Ukraine.
I'm sorry. Oh, you're right. Okay. I just wanted to ask about the air defenses and some of the sort of deliverables that are coming out of the NATO summit. Can you walk us through what you think will be happening in terms of any additional commitments in addition to the funding packages that have come? And can you say a few words about this project to sort of consolidate the way that weapons are going to Ukraine through the distribution center that I think there's a center that'll be set up in Wiesbaden under
Coordination.
Coordination.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. The purpose for me to come today was just kind of give you the laydown of the summit ahead, and not to get too far ahead of the leaders and the specific deliverables. But so without doing that and without getting fired, I'll just tell you that you're going to see some announcements on air defense. You're going to see some announcements on deterrence capabilities, not just with respect to helping Ukraine, but boosting the alliance. You're going to see some announcements with respect to the defense industrial base and how to shore up that and make it more resilient and invest it more, including in our own industrial base here in the United States. And you're going to see, as I alluded to, some discussion about Ukraine's path to NATO and what that can look like, and a reaffirmation of what the president has long said, that NATO is in Ukraine's future.
To follow up on that, can you say whether the word irreversible will be in the communique?
I'm not going to get ahead of the specific language one way or the other.
Just on Israel and Gaza, can you say anything about the Israeli response to the Hamas response to the ceasefire proposal? Lots of responses.
Yeah, so no surprise to y'all, I'm not going to negotiate here from the podium in public. I would just tell you that there has been some back and forth. As you know, we have a team in Cairo right now that includes Brett McGurk and the director of the CIA. They're meeting with their Egyptian, Israeli, and Jordanian counterparts, and there'll be follow-on discussions after that over the next few days. Look, we've been working this very, very hard, and there are still some gaps that remain in the two sides and the positions. But we wouldn't have sent a team over there if we didn't think that we had a shot here, and we're going to take every shot we can to see if we can't get this ceasefire deal in place.
Within days?
I couldn't give you a date certain.
Good, David.
Thank you. John, thanks for doing this. First, just to follow up on the communique, even if you can't get into irreversible, the president's objection last year and Chancellor Scholz's objection, if I remember Vilnius correctly, was that neither one of them wanted a date set for fear, I assume, that the United States and its allies would be drawn into the ground war if Ukraine was still at war while a NATO member. Does that remain today to be his primary objection? Is he willing to do wording that just is short of a date? Because even if you do the word irreversible or not, it doesn't really change the meaning very much of what you published in Vilnius. And I have a second on just the level of...
Look, I'll make this simple but unsatisfying. Again, I'm not going to get into the text and the discussions about what the draft's going to look like, David. I think you can understand that. But I do think your question is important to provide some context to. The president still believes that NATO is in Ukraine's future. What that future looks like depends on an awful lot of factors. Right now, you got a war going on inside Ukraine, and the focus rightly's got to be on helping them win that war. And we are, as I detailed in my opening statement. Number two, for any country that wants to join NATO, any country, and it's an alliance of democracies, the democracies have to meet certain guidelines, particularly when it comes to governance. And we are and will continue to work with Ukraine on reforms that are necessary for any democracy that wants to be a member of NATO. And then the third thing I'd say is, you know, it's a unanimous vote. Everybody has to be on board with that, and that can take some time as well. So the focus is on making sure that they can win now and that we can continue to work with Ukraine so that there is a path to NATO. The last thing I'd say is back to the bilateral security agreement that the president signed with President Zelensky at the G7 in Italy. I mean, we're one of many other nations that have done that too, because we know that whenever this war ends, however it ends, and whatever the border looks like, Ukraine's still going to have a long border with Russia that's going to need to be defended, and they're going to need the reassurance of being able to put forth a capable and competent defensive capability against Russian forces going forward. And that's why we're making sure that there are things in line to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself.
So one follow-up on that. You mentioned that it was 10 years ago that the 2% GDP goal was set. Obviously, there was no war underway at that time, and so the entire security situation looks radically different than it does than it did when that was set.
Well, I beg to differ. There was There was fighting in Afghanistan, and Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine in 2014.
Yeah. But I think the 2% may have been set.
It was in Wales. It might have been set before the invasion, but nevertheless, it was still a tense security environment.
Right. We're in something much different today. I think we're all in agreement, just given the amount of arms
No argument
going in. So, is part of the president's message at this summit that 2% is in the rearview mirror, that the NATO allies are going to have to be spending significantly more than that, maybe double that, for some countries, some larger economies? Or is he going to stay away from numbers? I know it's politically sensitive with all of them. You mentioned the word win. I was wondering how you're defining that.
Okay, there's a lot there. The president's not going to set a new bar or a new level of GDP spending on defense here at this summit. The goal is 2%. It was a commitment everybody made 10 years ago. Not everybody's there. Most of the remaining nations that haven't reached 2%, most of them, not all, are working on it and are getting there. And so I think the president wants to focus on that. Wants to laud and commemorate those who have, but also make it clear that those who haven't still have some work to do. On win, I think we've been consistent about this. I mean, at least I think I have. I mean, we want all of Ukraine's sovereign territory respected, which means we want no Russian forces in any part of Ukraine by the internationally recognized boundaries.
John, you just said, answering a question to Zeke, you're not picking up on signs of allies needing reassurances when it comes to President Biden. But the allies also look for a secure United States. Have you heard any conversations from the allies about issues of the elections process here, what they've been seeing, and the stability of the United States in the next few months, couple of years, etc.?
I'm not aware of any specific conversations with respect to our domestic political situation. But look, April, we watch the domestic political situation of our allies and partners, of course, like we did with the UK and with France over the weekend, and we have no doubt that they're watching ours as well, and that they'll be watching our election with a lot of keen interest. We certainly would expect that. But I'm not aware of any conversations that we've had at senior levels here, at the NSC or elsewhere at the White House, from allies specifically about this particular election.
The European Union who gathered reporters a couple of years ago with concerns about democracy here?
They might be talking to y'all, but I'm not aware of any specific conversations here.
Just want to circle back, Admiral, on Ed's question. So you said broadly that the president, in your view, is not represented by what was on the debate stage. Then you gave us an anecdote about a meeting today where he was engaged and so forth. Are you saying you have never encountered a situation where you thought that he was displaying any of those symptoms or affectations or something that would give pause, or are you just declining to answer one way or another?
Well, I'm a little uncomfortable answering these kinds of questions because as a spokesman, my job is to be an advisor and counselor, and I don't think it's appropriate for a spokesman to... yeah, I did because I wanted to make it clear. So, yes, I'm uncomfortable with these kinds of questions, but to answer your specific question, in my experience, the last 2.5 years, I have not seen any reason whatsoever to question or doubt his lucidity, his grasp of context, his probing nature, and the degree to which he is completely in charge of facts and figures. And if he isn't, what I've seen is, because it happened to me this morning, when he isn't and when I can't be in command of those facts and figures, I have to fess up and go get the information that he's asking for. And he asked me some questions this morning I didn't have answers for.
Okay, Nadia. Thank you, Karine. 2 questions on the Middle East. Israel has conducted the largest seizure of land in the West Bank, which undermines the president's vision for two-state solution. So why the White House has been not mum on that, and will the president...
We have not. It's not that we've been mum. There was a statement put out by the State Department about this call for settlements. Nothing's changed about our view that settlements continue to be counterproductive to peace and stability and the possibility of a two-state solution. We don't support that.
Okay, and second, you mentioned about the Ukraine and Russia in terms of the civilian casualties. The UN said today that actually half of the facilities of UNRWA has been hit, and 520 people have been killed in addition to the aid workers. So do you still believe that Israel is doing what it takes to protect civilian lives, including women and children?
We certainly believe that they need to continue to do more to protect innocent civilian life.
Not doing much. I mean, I've been asking this question for 9 months.
Your question wasn't about what they're doing or not doing. Your question was, do we believe that they should do more? And my answer is yes, well, they need to do more to protect civilian life. And we're going to continue to have conversations with them about how they're prosecuting these operations.
Thanks, John. Just sticking with the Middle East, but connecting it to the other big story. During the ABC News interview on Friday, George Stephanopoulos asked the president, was he, quote, the same man today that you were when you took office 3.5 years ago? And the president's reply began, in terms of successes, yes, I was also the guy who put together a peace plan for the Middle East that may be coming to fruition. Now, it may or may not be coming to fruition, we don't know. We do know 38,000 people have been killed in Gaza, almost 2 million displaced, and according to UNICEF, 1 in 3 children under the age of 2 is suffering from acute malnutrition. Does the president consider his Gaza policy a success?
The president believes wholeheartedly that this ceasefire proposal that we are trying to get done will make a big difference in terms of not only temporarily ceasing hostilities, but potentially giving us an opening to end this conflict. It's important to remember how this started, and you talked about our Gaza policy. I'll state it for you again. We want to make sure Israel has a right to defend itself from the kinds of attacks it suffered on the 7th of October, which I know is easy for people to forget. 1,200 people slaughtered, most at a music festival. Number 2, that Israel's doing everything they can to protect innocent civilian life. Is it enough? No. They need to continue to do more. And that we are doing everything we can to give humanitarian assistance into the people of Gaza. That's our Gaza policy. And as the president has also said, we would be and will still continue to be willing to adjust the policies that we are executing with respect to Gaza as we see things unfold on the ground.
But the broader question was, does he consider his policy to have been successful?
Israel is defending itself against a terrorist attack, so we can check that off. Humanitarian assistance continues to flow. In fact, if it wasn't for the United States, I dare say that not a fraction of the humanitarian assistance that is getting into Gaza would get in. Is it enough? No. And the Israelis have taken some steps to be more precise, more discriminate, and more careful in their operations. Is it enough? No. So we're going to keep at it. We're going to keep working on this.
Is it enough? No. The president described Israel as bombing, indiscriminate bombing in December. 7 months have passed and you have paused 1 arms shipment, as I understand. Is that correct?
That's right. Is there a question here?
Do you think that that's an effective response to indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population?
It's never right to be conducting indiscriminate bombing of a civilian population. That's why we continue to work with the Israelis to be more precise, to be more careful.
All right, just a couple more. Go ahead, Michael.
Sorry. Hi, Admiral. Can I just start with the Middle East as well? Hamas has accused Netanyahu of putting obstacles in the way of the ceasefire deal that is being talked about now. Does the US think that Netanyahu's government is doing everything it can to secure the ceasefire deal?
We're working hard to get that ceasefire deal in place. I'm not going to negotiate here in public or talk about who's saying what and who's doing what. We have seen both sides now, as Andrea rightly asked in her question. We've seen both sides come out with some public statements with respect to the text. The last thing I'm going to do is get into bartering here. We're trying to close those gaps as best we can. We wouldn't have sent the CIA director or Brett McGurk to Cairo if we didn't believe it was worth a shot and worth a chance. I would also add that on both sides, you see public comments that aren't necessarily fully reflective of the conversations that we're having with privately with them or their interlocutors.
Secondly, just on Ukraine, there was a bit of an information battle over the weekend. The Russians said that they destroyed 2 Ukrainian Patriot missile systems. The Ukrainians said that they were decoys. Does the US have its own independent evaluation of what happened during that strike? And what is the state of Ukraine's air defense system when it comes to Patriot missile systems?
Yes, we do. I'm not going to talk about it. And I think you're going to hear more here this week about what the Allies and the United States are going to do to continue to bolster Ukrainian air defense. Look, I know we get hung up on the Patriots, and I get that. There has been contributions of Patriot systems by other nations. We talked about how we're resequencing some of our deliveries of Patriot interceptors from some countries, now diverting them to Ukraine. We're doing that. Other nations are also trying to contribute Patriots. But let's not get caught up on just one system. There's short range, there's medium range, and there's long range air defense, and Ukraine needs all of it. And again, I think you're going to see this week the Allies really stepping up and showing that they're willing to continue to provide those kinds of capabilities.
Go ahead, Josh.
John, Viktor Orban is visiting China right now on the heels of a visit to Russia. I'm wondering whether the U.S. has any views on that and what impact it might have on the situation in Ukraine.
Yeah, we're concerned about it. It certainly doesn't seem to be productive in terms of trying to get things done in Ukraine and trying to move forward to achieve this just peace that President Zelensky continues to work hard, and we continue to try to operationalize. But yeah, it's concerning.
Was there any advance notification given to the U.S. on either trip, Russia?
None that I'm aware of.
Can I try one more time on irreversible? Does the U.S.
Yes,
have a
you can
position?
try.
Does the U.S. have a position on the inclusion of that word?
Our position is that NATO is going to be in Ukraine's future. There's a lot of work that needs to be done to get to that point, and the president's looking forward to talking to President Zelensky and our NATO allies about that path, that bridge to NATO.
Anita. Thank you so much, John. A question on Ukraine and one on Iran. Starting with Ukraine and this Russian rocket attack that killed 30 people at the largest children's hospital. Does this shift the U.S.'s position on not allowing Ukraine to strike directly at Russian airfields that originated these attacks?
Shift the position.
Yes. Make you change your mind about not allowing that, and how do you justify not giving Ukraine permission to attack?
There's been no change in our policy. You saw that the president several weeks ago gave guidance to Ukraine that they can use U.S. supplied weapons to strike targets just over the border. That's still the case.
On Iran, we've heard the U.S. say that this presidential election was not free and fair, that they have doubts that this is going to change anything meaningfully, but we've also heard the U.S. say that they will negotiate or do diplomacy with Iran when it serves our national interests. So is the U.S. now ready to resume nuclear talks, other talks, or make any diplomatic moves with Iran in light of this new president?
No.
Okay, Ariel. I'm sorry. No, can you elaborate, please?
Well, it seemed like a pretty easy question to answer. No, we're not in a position where we're willing to get back to the negotiating table with Iran just based on the fact that they've elected a new president. They're still supporting terrorist groups like Hamas and Hezbollah. They're still supporting the Houthis as the Houthis attack ships in the Red Sea. They're still attacking shipping as well. And they're still supplying drones and drone technology and drone expertise to the Russians so that the Russians can continue to kill innocent Ukrainians like they did over the weekend. So no.
A bit more moderate. Do you see any opening?
We'll see what this guy wants to get done, but we are not expecting any changes in Iranian behavior, sadly.
We got Ariel. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. Just this morning, the president said that France rejected extremism during the latest parliamentary election and expressed his confidence that the United States would also do so. So France has a very different electoral system, as you know. So why this optimism from the president? And more broadly, was there a sense of relief in the administration that the election turned out the way it did?
I think it's pretty clear from the election that the far right didn't find the purchase that it wanted to find, and that compromise in a democracy is going to have to still be the watchword in France as it is here in the United States. And it's not going to change our strong relationship with France. It's not going to change the fact that France is a valued NATO ally. And the president's looking forward to continuing to work with President Macron and the entire team.
All right, last question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Karine. Thank you, Admiral. I was just wondering, with the renewed spotlight and scrutiny on President Biden in public settings this week, how he's preparing for the NATO summit, how you guys are deciding how many questions to take at the press conference.
You gotta ask the press secretary that one.
You're the one who's prepping him for a lot of this on matters of national security and foreign policy.
So am I.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a team effort.
I will let Karine talk about the press conference, the big boy press conference that y'all are planning to have. But he has already had discussions with his national security team in the lead up to the summit, as you might expect that he would. He's reviewing material. He's doing his homework and getting ready. He's got the first major set of remarks tomorrow night at the Mellon Auditorium. He's working his way through those remarks, as you would expect him to do. And he's getting ready for at least the 2 bilateral meetings that we know he's going to have specifically with the new Prime Minister of the UK and with President Zelensky later in the week. So what I have seen from my perch is the normal amount of preparatory work that he does before a major international conference. No different than how he prepared for the G7 or for the events in Normandy or previous international fora. So it's pretty typical from what I've seen.
And do you expect Vice President Harris to play a role in the events this week or to take any meetings during the time that she'll be in Washington?
I can't speak for the Vice President's staff and team, but I can have them get back to you about what her schedule is going to look like.
Thank you so much, Admiral.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Admiral. Okay, well, all the debate questions have been answered. Press conference answered. Let me close my book and get out of here. Hi, Zeke.
Thanks, Karine. My first to you is on the credibility of this White House when it comes to talking about the president's health. When you were here last Tuesday, you were asked if the president had had any medical examinations since his physical in February, or that included the time period after the debate. You said flatly no. 3 days later, you admitted the president had a quote short check-in with the medical team thereafter. I mean, those are two very different answers.
No. Actually, if you were to listen to I think I did a 30-minute gaggle on Friday, 30 minutes with I think it was with the pool, and I said he did not have a medical. I cleared it up. You're right. You're correct. I said he didn't. I still stand, but he didn't have a medical exam. I said that in the gaggle, and you're right. I said that in the briefing. He had a check-in. And he said this on Friday. He had a check-in with his medical doctor, which is something that he does a couple times a week, as you know, and I stated this as well. He has, for those who don't know, obviously outside of the briefing room, outside of the White House, many Americans don't actually understand this, so let's take a step back. They deal with their medical issues or physicals very, very differently. They are they are lucky if they get to see their doctor once or twice a year, right? They have to get in a car, they have to either take public transportation in order to make that happen. The president's medical unit is literally down on the other side of the colonnade, is just down the steps from the residence, and so a couple times a week he does a check-in, a verbal check-in with his doctor while he's exercising. That is something that happens often. Matter of fact, he did a check-in today because I know folks were going to ask about if he was tested for COVID. He was not. We are following CDC guidance. He was not tested for COVID, just to let you guys know about that one. And if he has any symptoms, obviously we would test him.
Is that
but
in the context of the second gentleman's diagnosis?
Yes, which is why. No. It's in context of the second gentleman. But to answer your point, he did not have a medical exam. He did not have a physical. He did do like a verbal check-in with his doctor a couple days after the debate, and it was very quick. It was a couple of words that were spoken to each other, and that's how we were able to give you that answer. But he did not have a medical exam. He did not have a physical.
You said no, though, last Tuesday.
Yeah.
Was did you know about that verbal check-in, or
No.
did we just not ask him precise enough questions?
So the line of questions that I was getting that day was, in the way that I was hearing the question, was about the medical exam. I answered MJ's question when she asked me medical exam, and I answered and I said no, physical. And then somebody else asked me, was there a check-in? I did not mean to steer anybody wrong. I was still thinking about the medical exam. I was still thinking about the physical. That's how I answered the question. And then when it became, when the president actually spoke to it, I went back, asked the medical doctor, and he said they had a verbal check-in. That's what he said. But in answering the question, I was talking about the medical exam. I was talking about the physical.
And then two quick ones. There's been a lot of reporting in the last 24
Sure.
hours about a Parkinson's expert who's come to visit the White House almost a dozen times over the last year or so, including at least one meeting with the president's physician. Could you state, like, very clearly, yes or no, was that expert here to participate in anything surrounding the care of the President of the United States?
So let me just say a couple of things. We have had a comprehensive, and I just want to take another step back, comprehensive physical examination. The president has had that. We've given a comprehensive report. We've shared that the past 3 years. Every year that he has had this exam, he sees a neurologist. Just to give you a quote from that, from the report most recently in February, an extremely detailed neurological exam was again reassuring in that there were no findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorder such as a stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis, end quote. So that came directly from in February in that comprehensive report that was provided by the president's doctor to me, that I share with all of you. So anyone who is watching can certainly go to our website.
The question, which was this expert's visits, was multiple visits to the White House pertaining at all to the president's care?
Here's the thing. I've said he has had three. He has had three physicals. In those 3 physicals, that's when he has seen a specialist, a neurological specialist. I have to be super mindful here, and this is why, and I'll explain this to you in a second. There are thousands of military personnel who come onto this White House. Many of them get the care from the White House medical unit, and so need to be super careful. There are, the medical unit hosts a wide range of specialists, from dermatologists to neurologists, and so I cannot speak to every person because there's actually a security reasons to protect their privacy. We respect and protecting people's privacy, so do not want to share. I'm not going to share people's names from here, but the president, I can tell you, has seen a neurologist 3 times, as it's connected to a physical that he gets every year that we provide to all of you.
It's a very basic, direct question.
Wait, hold on, wait a second.
8 times, or at least once, in regards to the president specifically.
Hold on a second.
Not what you should be able to answer by this point.
Wait, no. No, wait a minute. Ed, please. A little respect here, please. So every year, around the president's physical examination, he sees a neurologist. That's 3 times, right? So I am telling you that he has seen a neurologist 3 times while he has been in this presidency. That's what I'm saying. I am telling you that he has seen them 3 times. That is what I'm sharing with you, right? So every time he has a physical, he has had to see a neurologist. So that is answering that question.
No, it's not.
No, it is. It is. You're
Dr.
asking me.
Kevin Kennard come to the White House
But I
specifically
also
about the
said to you,
condition.
Ed, I also said to you, for security reasons, we cannot share names. We cannot share names. We have to.
Others he would have met with.
We
but
cannot.
You can share names
No.
in regards to if someone came here in regards to the president.
We cannot share names of specialists broadly, from a dermatologist to a neurologist. We cannot share names. There are security reasons. We have to protect. I understand that. I hear you.
Right there for anyone to see.
Ed, I hear you. I cannot from here confirm any of that because we have to keep their privacy. I think they would appreciate that too. We have to give them.
The doctor.
We have to keep their privacy.
It is
It's
public.
public information.
I
It is
hear you.
listed that he went to
And
the
you're going to allow
guys,
this to fester longer, Karine, unless the White House answers the
hold
question.
on a second. There's no reason to go back and forth and be in this aggressive way.
Miffed around here about how information's been shared with the press corps
What
about him.
do you missed about? What do you missed about?
Everything he just asked about.
And then every time I come back and I answer the question that you guys asked.
Correctly, you didn't have to come back and clean it
I
up.
never answered the question incorrectly. That is not true. I was asked about a medical exam. I was asked about a physical. That was in the line of question that I answered. And I said, no, he did not have a medical exam. And I still stand by that. Matter of fact, the president still stands by that. He had a verbal check-in. That is something that the president has a couple times a week.
Now in regards to Dr. Kevin Kennard.
And I am telling you right now that I am not sharing confirming names from here. It is a security reasons. I am not going to do that, Ed. It doesn't matter how hard you push me. It doesn't matter how angry you get with me. I'm not going to confirm a name. It doesn't matter if it's even in the log. I am not going to do that from here. That is not something I am going to do. What I can share with you is that the president has seen a neurologist for his physical 3 times. 3 times. And it is in the reporting that we share a comprehensive reporting. Matter of fact, it's more than what the last guy shared, and it is in line with what George George W. Bush did. It's in line with what Obama did. And so it is comprehensive, it is out there. I just read a quote from it, but I am not going to devolve somebody's name or confirm someone. I'm not going to do that. That is as privacy for that person. I'm not going to do that. It doesn't matter how hard you push me. It doesn't matter how angry you get with me from here. I'm just not going to do that. It is inappropriate and it's not acceptable. So I'm not going to do it.
Not about the name.
Go ahead.
If you cannot confirm the name, can you confirm whether or not the president has seen this Parkinson's specialist? And you mentioned 3 times, but the visitor logs show a duration of 8 visits over 8 months. I think that is the crux of the question.
But I also said there are thousands of military personnel that come to the White House, and they are under the care of the medical unit. They are.
So can you confirm that the Parkinson's specialist visits were for the president or not?
What I can tell you is that the president has seen a neurologist 3 times, and I read to you what the neurologist has said, and I read to you the last line. I could say it again. No findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorders such as stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis. That is from February. That is coming from February. That is what the medical unit, the president's doctor, shared. And I said to you, it's happened 3 times. Each time there is a physical that occurs, and we put out a comprehensive report. That is when he has been able to see a specialist. So that's what I can share.
Question on this. Has the president, you mentioned Parkinson's, multiple sclerosis, all of these things. One diagnosis that we have heard of, potential diagnosis, is hydrocephalus, which is fluid buildup in the brain. It's something we've never heard in any of the medical reports. Is that something that the president has been evaluating?
If it's not in the medical report, obviously it's not something that the president is dealing with. Well, I can tell you this. Just going back to Parkinson's for a little bit, so to give you some answers here. Has the president been treated for Parkinson's? No. Is he being treated for Parkinson's? No, he's not. Is he taking medication for Parkinson's? No. So those are the things that I can give you full-blown answers on, but I'm not going to confirm a specialist, any specialist that comes to the White House out of privacy.
Question is, will the president go to the Hill today? I know we saw his letter. Is he intending to have this conversation face-to-face with him?
So look, the president, obviously this is someone who is a senator for 36 years, who was the president of the Senate as when he was vice president for 8 years, and he truly respects the members of Congress, and has always and will always do that, especially as a former senator. And I will say, and you've heard us say this before, or most recently, is this is a president who's won the primary, right, by 14 million votes, 87% of those votes, so certainly. And look, I don't have any engagements to read out, outside of that. But I will say that the president was in Pennsylvania. I just mentioned at the top, he got to see Senator Fetterman, Senator Casey. He also got to see Congresswoman Dean. He spent some time with them. They traveled across Pennsylvania. And I will say, when the president gets knocked down, he gets back up. This is quintessential Joe Biden. And there are a long list of other congressional members who have shown their support for this president. I don't have anything else to read out. You saw the letter. The letter was, I think, pretty clear on where the president stands, and I'll just leave it there.
You've noted that there are thousands within the Walter Reed system who may be treated by a specialist who visits here at the White House, but this neurologist had a meeting with the president's physician, with his doctor. You're refusing to say if he was here to evaluate the president or if he was consulting on the president's health. So what then was that meeting about?
And I will say that Dr. O'Connor leads the medical unit. He leads the medical unit. No, because we will not confirm or speak to names that you're providing to me. It is out of security reason, is out of protecting someone's privacy. We're just not going to do that. But they are. The reason that I mention that is because there are 1,000 military members that do indeed use the White House medical unit. They do. They get care from that.
We're talking about the President of the United States.
Guys, I'm trying to answer the question so you can connect the dot that there are multiple neurologists that come, not neurologists, specialists that come through here because there are more than 1,000 medical military personnel here,
But you certainly could clear this all up just by saying what he was doing here and if it was connected to the president, yes or no?
I am not going to confirm a particular neurologist, anybody. It doesn't matter if they're a dermatologist or a neurologist. I'm just not going to do that. I shared with all of you that the president has been with the neurologist 3 times as it relates to his physical, 3 times. So I'm just not going to do that out of security reasons, out of privacy. It is not something that I'm going to do. A measure of privacy we have to be able to give people from here.
One other question. The president's doctor, you say, has seen no reason to evaluate him for Parkinson's since his physical in February. Is that based on these verbal check-ins that you've been describing, based on his public appearances?
Wait, say that one more time.
You said that the president's doctor has seen no reason to evaluate him or reevaluate him for Parkinson's since that physical in February. What is that based on? Is it these verbal check-ins?
I never said that.
That's what the White House has said.
Well, what I have said is is that he just had a physical just in February, and the physical was very clear. It was a comprehensive physical. We gave out a report on that, and as it relates to the check-ins, that is something that is common. The president has a medical unit that is literally down the hall that he's able to check in with when necessary. They normally do it while he's exercising. That is not uncommon. It is very different. It is very different than any everyday American. They do not have that option. They do not have that access because he's president of the United States. Every other president has had that access, and they are able to do that.
So just to be clear, yes or no, has his physician seen a reason to reevaluate him for Parkinson's since the February physical?
No, the comprehensive report that you all have stands. The president obviously will have another physical, and we'll wait for that physical.
Great.
Yeah.
So the president has said twice that he's had neurological evaluations as part of his physicals, in these various interviews today and also on ABC. But there have been a number of people who have said, listen, why don't you have a cognitive test just to rule out that there are any issues? Would the president, would you counsel him to do that just to sort of put an end to these questions?
Andre, I hear you. The neurologists have said it is not warranted. The president himself, he said it today, he said it multiple times, and the doctor has said this. Everything that he does day in and day out as it relates to delivering for the American people is a cognitive test. And that is what the medical doctor has said. That is what the specialist has said. I just want to take a step back for a second, because I do take offense to what Ed alluded to. Come out here, every day there's a press briefing, and we do our best to give you the information that we have at the time. That's what we do. And we understand that the freedom of the press, we respect the freedom of the press. You heard me talk about this last week. I appreciate the back and forth that we all have. I try to respect you, and I hope you try to respect me. And we literally do everything that we can. My team does everything that we can to make sure we get the answers to you. That's what we do. And sometimes we disagree. Sometimes we are not in agreement. But you know what? That's democracy. That is what is important, to have that healthy back and forth. And so to say that I'm holding information or allude to anything else is not unfair. It's really, really unfair. I think people who are watching and have been watching this briefing for this past week could say that we are doing our best in this briefing to provide the information that we have. And I will admit, I will be the first one to admit, sometimes I get it wrong. At least I admit that. At least I admit that. And sometimes I don't have the information. And I will always, always admit that. But I do take offense to what was just happening at the beginning of this briefing. It's not okay. Go ahead. That is what is important, to have that healthy back and forth. And so to say that I'm holding information or allude to anything else is not unfair. It's really, really unfair. I think people who are watching and have been watching this briefing for this past week could say that we are doing our best in this briefing to provide the information that we have. And I will admit, I will be the first one to admit, sometimes I get it wrong. At least I admit that. At least I admit that. And sometimes I don't have the information.
And I will always, always admit that. But I do take offense to what was just happening at the beginning of this briefing. It's not okay. Go ahead.
We are seeking clarity.
I understand that.
And I think what we're trying to say is when a name is in a public record on a Waves form, that it is in the public domain.
Yep.
The president could authorize that his medical records or additional medical information could be made public because he could waive HIPAA, he could do those things.
Yep.
And if he chooses to do that, we would like to know more. Part of the reason we are pressing here is that we are not clear on what has happened, and therefore the American people to whom we report don't have a sense of it. So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And so
But the personal attacks is not okay.
And we want to have a positive.
Be very, very clear here.
So the question is, one question is, after a debate that drew days and days and days of scrutiny, why hasn't the president had an in-person physical check-in? Maybe blood work, maybe other things.
Yeah.
Because when he said he was seen, I certainly thought he had been physically seen, not a phone check-in.
No.
So and that's part of what we're saying about how information comes out in waves, and then we may have a different impression. So
And I totally
this
understand that.
dominated his presidency for 10 days, and he could submit to another exam, a full exam, partial exam, whatever. He can waive his right to make things public. None of us are asking about the military members who might be seeing a physician here. None of us. We are only asking about the president's well-being.
Understood.
And so that's why we want to understand. When you see on the public records that a physician with his specialty has come to the White House, gone to the residence clinic, and met with the president's physician, we feel like there is more to be said there, and that's what we're asking.
And I understand that, Kelly O, and you know I respect you wholeheartedly, and I've known you for some time. We want to be also, because we are talking about someone whose name who is out there, and I understand. I get it. It's in the law. I get that. It's in the law.
What's the security concern?
We want to respect that person and give them the measure of privacy that they deserve. The moment I say anything about any specialist, it becomes a thing from this podium. So what I can share, and this is what I can share, he has seen a neurologist 3 times. 3 times, not more than that. Not more than that. He's seen a neurologist 3 times. And that is connected to the physical, the comprehensive physical that we have been able to share with you. So I think that gives you some information about how many times. 3 times. And the reason why I am sharing that there are thousands of military personnel, so you also have an understanding, because there are 1,000 military personnel that comes here, and that not just comes here, but under the care of the medical unit, right? They get care from the White House medical unit. There tends to be dermatologists, from dermatologists to neurologists who come through here. Because the White House medical unit is indeed caring for folks. So I have confirmed 3 times. I just cannot get into details or confirm a name of a person. I cannot do that. There's security reasons. We have to give people a measure of privacy.
If he would waive some of his records and make those.
I don't know how all of that works. I'm not going to pretend I know how that works. And what I will do is certainly will share that information with the powers that be. I just don't want to get into a back and forth on that particular question. Yeah.
Thanks, Karine. I mean, to Kelly's point, the president today, when he called into Morning Joe, he said that he had released all of his medical records. Should we take that as an indication that he's going to do so?
Well, look, what I can say is that we have shared a comprehensive medical report that is pretty detailed, that is in line with other presidents, certainly not the last one, but the ones, the 2 before the last president, and we have been pretty much in line with what they have done. To be more clear, George W. Bush and also President Obama. So we've been.
The last one did let his donors come to the briefing room to speak to us.
Okay, and we know what that last president said from this briefing room. Okay, so
call today.
and only did 3 or 4 paragraphs. Very different approach.
During the call today to MSNBC, was the president reading off of a script?
So I was in the room when the president called into Morning Joe. The president spoke from his heart. The president was very clear. There was no script at all.
and he was very detailed. You heard him say, actually, during the call that he was reading some quotes. He said it. He shared that information. He was reading some quotes from the debate, so he shared that with you. What you heard was a passionate interview. It was about 18 minutes. He talked about and laid out his vision for this country. He talked about how he wants to make sure we move forward. I want to be really careful because he also talked about the campaign, which I can't do from here. But I think it was incredibly powerful.
He was reading quotes, but not from a script?
Nope, it was not a script.
In a big boy press conference, how many questions should we expect that he is going to take?
So look, it is going to be a solo press conference. It is going to be certainly more than a 2+2. I'm not going to, we're still working it out, so I'm not going to go into specifics from here. But you could expect a solo press conference from this president at the end of the NATO summit. He's looking forward to it, and he will be taking your questions. So that'll be a good thing.
Something different.
Great. I have two questions. One, a follow-up on Dr. Kennard, and that is, can you explain what the role of Megan Nasworthy is? Does she oversee care for some of those military personnel that you were referencing as a group, or does she oversee care for the president?
I believe, again, want to be careful here. I know who you're speaking of. I don't have her full portfolio in front of me, so I would have my team and I will be happy to get back to you.
Okay. And then on the president's and the White House's engagement with House Democrats, and Democrats more broadly, there was an article a month ago in the Wall Street Journal that the White House universally panned because the on-the-record quotes criticizing the president's age and acuity were largely from Republicans. But I want to ask about the graphs in that story about Democrats. It said that the White House... From that same story. It said that the White House kept close tabs on the Journal's interviews with Democratic lawmakers, and after the offices of several Democrats shared with the White House either a recording of an interview or details about what was asked, some of those lawmakers spoke to the Journal a second time and once again emphasized Biden's strength. They quote Congressman Gregory Meeks, a New York Democrat, saying, "They just, said that I should give you a call back." I'm wondering if you could characterize what the White House told Democrats to tell reporters about the president's
I think the Democrats spoke for themselves. I think, you know how stories work. There's a lot of back and forth. When you all come with a story from us, and we want to make sure you hear from other voices, we make that available to you all. And it's up to the reporter if they're going to reach out or not to that particular person. But we expect and we anticipate and we understand that it doesn't matter who, if it's a congressperson or a governor or any elected official, they're going to speak for themselves. They're going to speak for themselves. And I would say that Representative Greg Meeks has also been very supportive. If you fast forward to where we are today, Representative Meeks has been very supportive of this president, continuing, moving forward. And we've heard from many others. CBC more broadly has been very supportive. We heard from the chair, Chairman Hosford from the CBC. And so that is the type of support that we continue to see.
So there hasn't been outreach by the White House to Democrats who might have misgivings about the president's age or acuity to have them say positive things about the president publicly?
I don't quite understand where you're going with the question. I think I explained it. Sometimes when you all are working on stories and we want to hear, we were trying to provide supporters from the president, that is not unusual. And it is up to the reporter to reach out or not. And so that is something that we certainly do. That is something that, that is not uncommon. But what I would say more broadly, there are congressional members, as we're talking about what's happening in Congress, as we're talking about the president's outreach, as we're talking about, how we move forward. There are congressional members out there who have been incredibly supportive. We have to remember there are hundreds of House members, and so. There are folks out there.
The president's outreach today and tomorrow ahead of these all conference and all caucus meetings.
So what I can say is that, as you all know, the president has done some outreach. He's spoke about it himself. I can say, as of today, he is engaged with dozens of members, whether in person or on calls. We saw him engaging with congressional members over the weekend. We saw him doing that on several of the trips that he has done over the past 10 days. There have been about 6 states that he's
been able to stop over and engage with supporters, so he's been able to do that. And there's a long list. I'm trying to spare you the list here, but there is a long list. Senator Chris Coons, Senator John Fetterman, Senator Alex Padilla, Senator Chuck Schumer, Senator Bernie Sanders, Senator Raphael Warnock. It goes on and on. Representative Clyburn, Al Green, Horsford, as I mentioned already. There has been a long list of, we believe, incredibly supportive congressional members who have continued.
That have been provided to us from the campaign too, but I'm wondering if the president has spoken directly with Leader Schumer and Minority Leader Jeffries in the last 24 hours, and whether the president I hear you. We shared that just last week that the president spoke to the leadership, obviously on the Democratic side. Has he spoken to them since yesterday?
I don't have anything to read out to you as far as what we've shared with you last week, but the president has been in regular touch, and those conversations went very, very well. I think he mentioned in particular Leader Jeffries that went almost for an hour. The president said that himself. He said how much they had a very, very good conversation. The president saw Congresswoman Dean, as I mentioned. He saw both senators of Pennsylvania as well yesterday, traveled across the state and had really two big events with supporters, with Americans who got to hear directly from the president. And I think that's important.
Great.
Again, Michael.
Thanks, Karine. Were all three of President Biden's neurological exams that you've confirmed, were they all conducted at Walter Reed?
Look, I don't have anything to state as to location. What I can say for sure that he has seen a neurologist 3 times as it relates to the exam that he takes every year. And I just don't have a location to speak to.
Well, let me just try a different way. I mean, has any neurologist?
And you also know that the president does go to Walter Reed to do his physical exam.
Well, has a neurologist? I'm not talking about anyone in particular, regardless of the identity, name of that person. Has any neurologist came to the White House to visit President Biden?
What I can tell you during those exams that we have been able to do every year for the past 3 years, and there's a comprehensive exam that we share, a comprehensive report that we share with all of you. He has seen a neurologist.
And that's what I'm trying to clarify. It seems like those were taken at Walter Reed. And so it's an important distinction.
You all know that he does indeed go to Walter Reed as part of his physical exam. That is no secret. That is something that he does. And I also confirmed that he sees a neurologist every time that he's done these exams. I don't have anything beyond that.
Thanks.
Karine.
I know. Go ahead, April.
Karine, as you're talking, as everyone is talking about neurological issues, this is different but kind of on that same page. The president has had 2 aneurysms. Okay, and there are complications from aneurysms to include impaired short-term memory, inability to concentrate, as well as speech difficulties. Have any neurologists worked with him or just trying to observe him as he is a person who has suffered from 2 aneurysms that could have been fatal?
Look, April, in the comprehensive reporting that we share with all of you on a yearly basis, the neurological exam have been detailed, extremely detailed. It is directly from the doctor. They talk about the specifics of that neurological exam. And so I would refer you to the 6-page comprehensive memo, and that's what I refer you to.
But that is something that we know about, that he had 2 aneurysms. Yeah. And that is all of those complications are part of a neurological exam. Have they tested for that at all?
What I can tell you is that the exams have been detailed, they have been extensive, and that's what I can share with you. I would refer you to the document, to the report.
Question. Sure. We're just days away from the Republican convention. How do you, as this White House who stands behind this president, how do you work to do an image change to revamp him, to make him shinier and brighter, if you will?
So I'm not going to speak to the Republican convention. That's something that I'm not going to do, but I am going to. Hold on a second. Hold on, give me a second. Look, in the past 10 days, the president has gone to 6 states. He has. He's gone to North Carolina, New Jersey, New York, Georgia, Pennsylvania. I know that's a Commonwealth, but he's been to 6. And in that time, he has engaged directly with the American public. And you've seen the enthusiasm, you've seen the energy. He's been able to talk to them directly and talk about his goals for the future. Talk about what he's done in the past 3.5 years. They have heard specifically from him on even his health, even the debate. And I think that's important too. So, and you just heard me lay out the next 2 weeks. So the president's going to continue to go out there. He's going to continue to be present in the communities. He's going to continue to hear directly from the American people. And that's the best way to do this. That's the best way to get out there. That's the best way to make sure that you have your finger on the pulse and that the American people get to see you for themselves.
Since you all speak to the Republican convention, what about the Democratic convention?
I can't speak to the Democratic convention either. I can't speak to that. That's for the. No, but you're asking me to speak to 2 things that I can't speak to from here. That is something that the campaign and the convention can speak to. Very, very.
Right at the end of the
April, you may not like my answer, but I'm telling you the president's going to continue to go out there. I just shared with you at the top a robust plan that the president has to be out there, whether it is in Vegas, whether it's in Texas, and let's not forget the other states that he's visited in the last 10 days. In the last 10 days, there's a stark difference from what we've been doing and what the other side is doing. Stark difference. And so the president is committed. He's going to continue to do that. He wants to engage directly with the American people. 600 people at the church yesterday, 600 people at the event in Harrisburg. That's a pretty good start. And that's just a continuation. That's actually not a start. That's a continuation. Go ahead, Josh. I know. I'm getting you.
Is it still the administration's policy that physicals are done annually?
Yes, that is just like every other president has done before this president. We're going to continue to uphold that.
So it would be fair to us to assume that as of now, his next expected physical would be next year?
It would be next year. The last one was in February.
Okay. And can you clarify for us, forgive me, I might have missed it, or by design, he will or he won't go to the Hill tomorrow?
Say that one more time. I don't have any engagement to share. As you know, NATO is front of mind. That's what he's focused on. You saw that letter that came out from the president. He's going to be focusing on the more than 30 world leaders that are coming here for 75th anniversary of NATO, continuing to show the strength of our alliance. I think it is something that the president's very much looking forward to, and you'll certainly hear from the president on Thursday when he gives his press conference, his big boy press conference, as your colleague Justin has stated many times.
I'll give him your regards. We shouldn't expect then some sort of big outreach push to member of Democratic.
I mean, look, I just shared that he has done dozens of calls, not just calls, but also face-to-face, as he did in Pennsylvania. His team, campaign side, they're going to do their thing. We're going to do our thing on our side. And he, respects tremendously the Congress. And so he's in regular contact with them, and that's what you're going to continue to see. All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone.
One more, Karine.
Okay, no question for Peter Doocy, although he certainly gave it a college try there from the front row, but was passed over several times. There were some challenging questions there, a heated White House briefing, as the press is demanding answers, specific answers about President Biden's health, trying to figure out what was it that caused that debate performance. Is there a medical underlying issue, as Nancy Pelosi raised? Was it an episode, or is this a more chronic situation? So there are a lot of questions about the president's medical condition, as some in his party continue to pressure him to step aside. Let's bring in Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff for President George W. Bush, and Robert Wolf, former Obama advisor, who spent some time with President Biden recently and was on this big donor call that just happened an hour or so ago. Both are Fox News contributors. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's good to have you with us. Robert, let me start with you, because I know based on reporting that President Biden got on that donor call. Was that unexpected? How persuasive was he with these donors? And what was their reaction? What was their temperature?
It was only called this morning, to my knowledge. That's when I got the email. We filled out the Zoom. I think it was after he did the Morning Joe discussion. And he said right away, I wanted to talk directly to the donors. I know I had a really bad night, no doubt. But it's time to unify. It's time to take on Trump. You know, he was very clear, don't forget what's in sight of ours. And we have to make sure that the Democrats hang in there together. And I would just say he went from digging in over the weekend to he's now on full offense. And the last thing I would say is this so-called field day that everyone was talking about that's happening today and tomorrow. So far, the field day is the Congressional Black Caucus supports him. The Congressional Hispanic Caucus supports him. So it definitely felt like there was a lot of momentum versus what happened over the last 10 days.
Well, you know, I mean, that's great that he wants to hang in there and he sounds committed to doing that. But what does that change about the way that people felt the day after the debate and these concerns that go from, you know, Jeffrey Katzenberg and whether or not he's been honest with donors all the way to what we just heard at the White House? Real questions about how honest they've been or whether or not they've been covering up his health situation, Robert.
I think, Martha, that's a fair conversation to have. You and I spoke many times on TV and together. And listen, I was very clear right at the onset. That was a bad night. And people are crazy to think there was anything good about it. That being said, it's been 9 days since. He's been to Wisconsin. He's been to Pennsylvania. He was on. He's done a bunch of outreach, and things change. I mean, listen, if we went on former President Trump's worst nights, we would have some difficult discussions too. I'm not saying that was a good night, and I certainly had my concerns, but right now there's a choice to make, and the choice is President Biden versus former President Trump. Okay. And so we're going to keep fighting until someone says there's a change. And I don't think there'll be one.
Oh, so all right. So Robert's clearly saying right now, Carl, that he thinks that this is set, that the race is Trump and Biden, that Biden isn't going anywhere. What's your reaction to all these quick developments today, Carl?
There's cheering in Mar-a-Lago for that sentiment. Look, the polls are indicating that this race is widening for Trump, and it is because that debate confirmed the feelings that a vast majority of the American people have had for over a year and a half that Joe Biden is too old to be an effective president, particularly when he would be 82 if he were to be reelected and serving until 86. That debate was not an incident. That debate was not an off moment. It was not a bad night. It was a reflection of the reality of who Joe Biden is at the age of 81. And he's entitled to be stubborn, but the people that he's making happy by being stubborn are the high command of the Trump team, because they know what they've got. They've got a guy that the American people believe lacks the physical stamina, the mental acuity, and the judgment to be an effective president. And despite whatever doubts people may have about Trump, they're going to go for the strong leader rather than the weak guy.
So, Carl, just staying with you for a moment, just looking at this with a cold, political eye to what's happening here, is this because there's no obvious solution to fix this problem on the Democrat side? And I'll let Robert weigh in on this as well. Is this where they are at? This is very much, the window is so much tighter than it was when LBJ got out in March.
Yeah, look, first of all, yes, this all depends upon Joe Biden making a decision, which clearly he, his wife, and his sister, who play sort of the triumvirate. There's now a quartet. They've added in Hunter Biden as a key advisor on this issue, apparently. Until they make a decision that it's time to get out, he's in, and he's going to lose. Now, yes, there is a way out. There's a Democratic convention that starts on the 19th of August. They are entitled to vote for whomever they want if he withdraws. Of the nearly 4,000 delegates, all but 100 are slated by the Biden people, meaning we don't have 45% Bernie Bros or Elizabeth Warren or Social Democrats of America lunatics. We've got normal Democrats. And if nobody has an advantage on the first ballot, on the second ballot, the House of Lords of the Democratic Party, the super delegates, including people like Donna Brazile, get to vote, most of whom are pros who care deeply about the Democratic Party winning. Will there be an ugly contest? I don't think, though. There'll be a contest, and everybody who enters that contest will will have an oppo package on somebody else who's running that they'll drop to the media. But I think most of the Democrats who might be inclined to offer themselves up are going to realize that if they're nasty about other Democrats, that's going to hurt them when those delegates gather in Chicago to vote.
Yeah. Robert, last question to you. The president said in the George Stephanopoulos interview that Schumer and Pelosi will not try to push him out. He said it's not going to happen. They're not going to do that. Schumer today said, I'm for Joe. Sherrod Brown says there's some legitimate questions that are being raised about all of this. Is this where we are today? Where are we 5 days from now, in your opinion?
I think 5 days is going to be more momentum for President Biden. I mean, you have Wes Moore, you have Josh Shapiro, you have Gretchen Whitmer, you have Governor Evers. You have the most popular people in the party actually with him. Yesterday, you had Senator Casey. So the momentum's going one way. And like I think Carl said, it's highly unlikely there's going to be this wild convention where West Virginia says one thing and Vermont says something else. It will be President Biden versus former President Trump, and there'll be a choice. I would say to Carl one last thing. We've outdone every poll since Dobbs by 6 to 8 points. Carl's a pro at this. He knows that every poll is only that day.
True.
Well, thanks for offering up my opinion. My opinion is those polls look really bad, and they're not going to change.
All right, and we've also got another debate in September if this is the way it goes. So we'll see what happens on that September debate and whether or not it is the same format as this one. No notes in front of you, no nothing. I thought it was interesting that Karine Jean-Pierre was asked if he had notes today because it certainly sounded like he might have. She said he wasn't reading from a script, which isn't exactly not having notes, but we'll see. Carl and Robert, thank you very much, gentlemen. Great to see you both. So you saw those heated questions in the briefing that we just watched, questions about Parkinson's disease, about an expert, a Parkinson's expert who made multiple trips to the White House. Who was he there to see? This is some of that. Watch.
Can you confirm that the Parkinson's specialist visits were for the president or not?
What I can tell you is that the president has seen a neurologist 3 times, and I read to you what the neurologist has said. And I read to you the last line. I could say it again. No findings which would be consistent with any cerebellar or other central neurological disorders such as stroke, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, or ascending lateral sclerosis. That is from February.
Okay, with that, we bring in Fox News medical contributor and expert, Dr. Marty Makary. Doctor, good to see you today. There was a lot of medical language in there, talk about testing. What did you hear in there, and what did you hear not said?
Well, it's interesting, the barrage of questions really sparked by this initial report that a neurologist who specializes in early Parkinson had visited the White House 9 times in the last year and only once in the preceding 3 years under the Biden administration. So people are understandably raising flags and asking a lot of questions. The president does have some of the symptoms of slowing in your movement, almost like slow motion movements, some memory loss. But it's unlikely the president actually has Parkinson for a couple of reasons. One, the White House is clearly denying that that's a diagnosis. They're saying he's never taken levodopa, which is the medication. And the president does not have a tremor, which is associated in at least 80% of cases. It appears the president has age-related dementia, which is important because it doesn't get better with rehab like a stroke or some other acute event might.
So what kind of test would you need to do to ascertain if he does have dementia? Would that require a brain scan? And we didn't get a clear answer on whether or not these visits with neurologists included an MRI or a brain scan.
Yeah, so there are 3 validated tests to evaluate somebody's mental status. Some are short, some are longer. As you know, President Trump boasted that he passed these tests in flying colors. Some people are saying, put this controversy to rest, and the president should take one of the mental status exams, like the mini mental status exam. There's no imaging study that's going to really be diagnostic here, but this is what people want to see. Look, if I put a medical student in front of a standardized patient that was Joe Biden, and that student came back and reported that the president had normal cognition and no diagnoses, that student would fail the exam. This is clearly something some dementia. It may be mild, it may be mildly progressive and not severely progressive, but clearly it's not the sort of patient you say, looks good, I'll see you in a year, as the White House had suggested. This is somebody you follow closely.
Yeah. One more for you, doctor, if I may. A reporter brought up the 2 aneurysms, near-fatal aneurysms that Joe Biden suffered. I believe that was back in the 80s and 90s. It was many years ago. Would that have an impact on the kind of symptoms that appear now?
I don't think so, because you can rehab a little bit from those acute events. We saw it with Senator Fetterman, for example. You can make small improvements, but not with age-related dementia, not with early Alzheimer's, which appears also to be an unlikely diagnosis, or at least not apparent at this time. It appears to be age-related dementia, and that is progressive, and it doesn't get better.
Okay. Dr. Marta Makary, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today, Doctor.
Thanks.
So we just heard a little while ago from Robert Wolf, President Biden, saying that President Biden is clearly on offense now. We saw this Morning Joe interview this morning. He says that he is not getting out, says he's standing up to the elites, and he's standing up for American democracy, he says, claiming that it's former President Trump, in his opinion, who is unfit to be commander-in-chief. Watch this.
He hasn't done a damn thing since the debate. He's been riding around in a golf cart for 10 days, was down in Mar-a-Lago talking with his wealthy friends. I'm not running because of these guys, Joe. I'm running because, and you know me well enough to know this from the very beginning, I ran because I never bought on to the trickle-down economic theory. I never bought into the notion that we have to walk away from the rest of the world and cave to Putin or anybody else.
Okay, with that, let's bring in Trump 2024 senior advisor Alina Habba. Now in that role, she has been an attorney for President Trump as well, a spokesperson, a legal spokesperson, and now you are an advisor for the 2024 campaign. Alina, good to see you. Welcome. Good to have you here.
Good to see you.
What's your reaction to what appears to be pretty strong evidence today that Joe Biden is not going anywhere?
I think it's great. I'll echo my client and President Trump's sentiments. If America wants more open borders, more fentanyl pouring through, terrorists and the such, and they want to make China great again, then I think this is your guy. He's obviously doubling down. We've heard that his son is sitting in on Oval Office meetings, Martha, which is concerning in itself, the person who has no role in the White House and has no business being there. But I think it says it all. President Biden is doubling down. Why? Because he's got an agenda, and the agenda is not the American people. It's very, very obvious to everybody. He is clearly on the take for all of these items, electric cars, China, whatever it is and whoever it is that he may be in bed with and have deals with, and they got to pay the big guy. So the big guy can't step down. So we're in the situation as Americans where we have to make a choice, and we have to vote in November loud and clear, so they can't steal it. We can't have cheating, and we need a fair and free election. And hopefully in November, everybody will come out, do their part, and we'll get President Trump back in.
Well, there'll be a number of opportunities between these two candidates, including the debate I just mentioned in September, to address some of the issues that you have just raised. With regard to an event that was supposed to happen this week, which was the sentencing of the former president in the New York case, in the so-called Stormy Daniels hush money case, let's put this polling up. Should Trump serve time in prison for his felony conviction? It looks like Americans are very split on this, having watched that story play out, Alina. Should serve time in prison, 48%. Should not serve time in prison, 50%. And the numbers are somewhat similar when they ask the same question about Hunter Biden. So what's your reaction to that as someone who supports him and as someone who was involved in his defense?
The fact that we even went through this trial is wrong. So I think people that have the public perspective or the media's perspective from those sitting in the courtroom is very different than my perspective. And unfortunately, given privilege, I can't discuss the details, but I can say this. President Trump never did anything wrong. This is the regime's attack for election interference. It's very simple. So yes, criminals, real criminals who have done crimes, who have fair and free trials, those are the people such as Hunter Biden, who need to face repercussions for their actions. Now, people that are the subject and victims of political persecution and prosecution, they have no business doing this. They have wasted taxpayer dollars for 3 years, Martha. I have been in and out of courts, as everybody knows. And the fact that President Trump's lawyer has become well known says it all. This is not something that has ever happened. President Trump had never had anything like this against him before, but when they knew they were losing, this is what they did. So now, of course, the people you ask that want to jail him because they've seen Biden's performance in the debate, they of course want to jail him because they can't win without doing so. But the real Americans, the ones that see through this nonsense, they won't have it.
We'll see what happens in September, and obviously we'll talk about it between now and then, but that sentencing is now off the table until after both conventions, and we'll see what happens when September rolls around. Alina, good to have you here. We'll see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So our breaking coverage continues with Kellyanne Conway next.
Veteran homeowners, have you looked at the interest rates on your credit cards lately? Get ready for a shock. The rate on many credit cards is now over 22%. If you want to save hundreds of dollars a month, pay off the balances on your high-rate cards and other debt with a lower-rate VA home loan from New Day USA. And get the financial peace of mind every veteran deserves. No one takes care of veterans like New Day USA.
Call 1-800-360-7181.
Lumino whitening strips. No peroxide, no pain. I can use them every day if I want. Eat what I want, drink what I want. Pop in a Lumino strip and hello. My smile is back on point. Easy.
Hi, I'm Dr. Boyer. I'm a chiropractic physician. I love to look at new things and new ways to help my patients in their pursuit for wellness. And one of the biggest things is nutrition. Nutrition is such an important part. Early on in my practice, I was introduced to Balance of Nature. What an amazing product. We know nature's pretty good about giving us the nutrition that we need through our fruits and vegetables. So Balance of Nature, they've taken fruits and vegetables, they freeze dry it, turn it into a powder and put these into a capsule. You take your fruit capsules and your vegetable capsules every day, and then your body knows what to do with those. I love it. I love what it has done for me, and I know what it has done for my patients. It is the best product that I have ever come across.
Splash into your summer with Balance of Nature's summer savings. Get 50% off your first set as a preferred customer with free shipping and our money-back guarantee. While supplies last, claim this offer by using discount code Fox News.
Oh, my leaf filter? I just scheduled an appointment online and the inspection was a breeze. They explained everything.
Leaf Filter's technology protects your gutters for good.
Now, my home is protected.
Call 833-LEAF-FILTER or visit leaffilter.com.
Whether you're a professional driver or just a fan, vehicle breakdowns are costly.
It started tugging. It started making some really weird noises. The last thing I remember is just the engine cut out.
If your check engine light comes on tomorrow, the repair could easily cost thousands.
Is that transmission? It's an exhaust leak. Broken axle.
But with Endurance, you could never pay out of pocket for a costly repair again.
They covered a $14,000 engine replacement.
I had a seat sensor that went out, $1,400. Endurance paid it.
We got a brand new transmission and we never seen the repair bill.
Use any certified mechanic you want. Just bring your car in and Endurance will pay them direct. All major parts are covered.
What I like about Endurance, they don't play games, there's no middleman. They're a solid company.
If I didn't have Endurance, I would have paid over $7,000 out of pocket to repair my vehicle.
Something is going to break down. Make Endurance pay for it.
With Endurance, your car repair costs go way down, while your car's life expectancy goes way up, allowing you to drive more and pay less.
One claim alone saved me more than $4,000.
I've had 5 claims, and that is $3,500 that I've kept in my pocket.
So, who's going to pay for your next car repair? You or Endurance?
Whether you put 10,000 or 100,000 miles a year on your car, if it's less than 20 years old, Endurance has you covered with unlimited miles. Plus, your plan covers 24/7 roadside assistance anywhere in the country. Call right now to get $300 off any plan, plus a full year of our top-tier elite benefits, a $2,000 value free. And all Endurance plans come with a 30-day money-back guarantee. but you have to act now.
Call 1-855-276-1563. That's 1-855-276-1563.
1 week from today, the Republican National Convention kicks off in Milwaukee. That is when former President Trump says that he will reveal his running mate. Could be any time between now and then, according to some of his advisors. So he's reportedly focused on Senators Marco Rubio of Florida, Senator Vance in Ohio, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum. But who knows? There could be a surprise in the mix that he's not talking about. Those picks are, according to the Washington Post. We've all talked about that quite a bit in recent weeks. Let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, former senior counselor to President Trump and managed the 2016 campaign, and now president of KA Consulting and host of a brand new show, Here's the Deal with Kellyanne, starting Thursday on Fox Nation, which is exciting. And we look forward to seeing that, Kellyanne. Great to have you with us today.
Great to see you, Martha.
So listening to the back and forth between Joe Biden, who was on Morning Joe this morning, digging in his heels, not going anywhere, not going to bend to the elites, and certainly not to the David Axelrods in the world. I think all that has really animated him. But here's what they said about how former President Trump has been behaving in the wake of the debate, and Biden also echoed this sentiment. So clearly this is a talking point. Watch.
Donald Trump. He's burrowed down in Mar-a-Lago. They won't let him out. He's a prisoner in a gilded cage because they're afraid he may actually open his mouth.
I found that comical, Kellyanne. I mean, anybody who has ever watched or known former President Trump, I don't think any advisors could keep him anywhere that he didn't want to be. He goes where he wants to go and speaks out when he wants to. But what do you think the strategy is for the former president right now?
Well, for the current president and his allies in the media, they are silly, sophomoric, and scared, Martha. They see what they've got on their hands. It's been revealed, everything they concealed. We all know what we saw. But for President Trump, I actually think it's a continuation of the strategy he had on the debate stage, which is let Joe Biden talk. And numbers numb Joe Biden's brain. When we all got an opportunity to hear Joe Biden speak uninterrupted, unscripted, we saw the disaster that ensued. I like the fact that President Trump is busy raising tons of money, preparing for his convention next week, sharpening up his VP pick, and then also allowing this news cycle, which is owned by the Democrats, to be exactly that. He sees them cannibalizing themselves. They're in total chaos and crisis. So why step in the middle of it? He's got the country to himself next week at his convention.
Yeah, it seems like a good strategy. There's a lot of twisting in the wind right now, and it looks like the former president is saying let him twist away for the moment. I thought this was interesting. This is GOP strategist Brad Todd. And here's what he said in the Washington Post this weekend. He said, Doug Burgum is the choice if you're worried about governing. J.D. Vance is the candidate if you think you're going to win no matter what and you're trying to shape the party going forward. Marco Rubio is the candidate you pick if you are worried about winning the election. I'm curious what your assessment is and what you think is going to happen with this VP pick, Kellyanne.
So that comment shows you that any of those three gentlemen, along with some others on the long short list, Martha, would be an asset to President Trump's ticket. Look, it's not that an African-American or Hispanic running mate would help him win those voters. He's winning them all by himself now, and everybody's polling without a running mate. But I think there's an argument to the unification of the party that President Trump started. And we saw him 2 weeks ago in Washington, D.C., when he basically met with Mitch McConnell, said to David Valadao, one of the people who voted to impeach him, how can I help you with your reelection? He endorsed Larry Hogan, who won't endorse and vote for him. He's unifying the party. So I think if you're going to broaden the party, you think of it that way. And I feel like whoever doesn't make it to VP is still going to be incredibly helpful and supportive of the America First agenda, either in the cabinet or in the Senate or as a governor or elsewise. But, you know, President Trump, he's got this, I'm not a golfer, I'm trying, but he's got this thing called the yips. He's always very superstitious about things. And I feel like if he made a decision a while ago in his mind, he's probably close to keeping that decision. People are suggesting he can broaden his reach now that he's so far ahead. But he's also someone, and I repeated this to him last week, I said, I tell people all the time, Mr. President, you're the one saying keep it humble, put your head down and just go win. I feel like he never thinks things are assured. He believes you've got to run through the tape and keep going. Remember, there's a 3-day rescission deal in real estate where everybody has 3 days to upend the deal they just made. I think that kind of mindset always carries with President Trump. And he'll make a great decision, and we'll all be happy with it. And compare that to what's going on the other side. They've got Kamala Harris as number 1 and number 2. I like our odds as Republicans.
So look at your crystal ball for the Democrats. You see Biden staying in, and you think that he makes it across the finish line, that he does a debate in September. You know, there aren't that many people who have spoken out against him. There's lots of rumblings, but not a lot of people who put their name on it.
That's right. Lots of blind quotes, lots of kvetching. You're going to need more than 5 members of Congress and a couple dozen donors, Martha, and some people clutching their pearls to get him out. I just think this is somebody who ran for president 3 times in 2 different centuries, finally got the brass ring, takes credit for getting rid of Donald Trump, and thinks that he's done a great thing by putting Kamala Harris with him. But no, I think he digs in. Why not?
All right, we got to go. Thank you, Kellyanne. Thank you so much. That is the story for today, July 8th. Big week, folks. So stay tuned for all of our coverage. We will see you right back here tomorrow at 3.
More Democrats stepping up calls for President Joe Biden to step aside. That's on the House side. Now all eyes are on what Democrats do on the Senate side. Murky developments there. But no matter what, all signs seem to suggest that the president is not budging. But how long can this keep on going and going and going? We've got Peter Doocy at the White House on what they're saying. Aisha Hasni on Capitol Hill on the intra-party battle that is still mounting. And former Ohio Democrat and presidential candidate Tim Ryan, who fears that this fallout from Joe Biden resisting isn't done. Welcome, everybody. I'm Neil Cavuto, and this is Your World. Let's get right to it in the Capitol with Aisha Hasni. Well, they made it very clear at the White House, Aisha, that they want to stick with the president. The president wants to stick out this race, but it might not be that easy.
Yeah. Hey, Neil, good afternoon to you. That's right. So everyone's been watching to see if the dam is going to break here on Capitol Hill. And specifically, people are watching these vulnerable Democrats. Leader Schumer came out today very defiantly supportive of the president, saying, I'm for Joe. But those Senate Democrats, those vulnerable Democrats, not so much. And I'll start with Sherrod Brown, senator from Ohio, who reportedly has been saying that voters that he's been talking to do have a legitimate question about the president's future. And Democrat John Tester of Montana put out a pretty forceful statement today, calling out Biden, not calling him to step down, but he did say this. Let's put it up on the screen here. He wrote, President Biden has got to prove to the American people, including me, that he's up to the job for another 4 years. Meanwhile, I'll continue to do what I've always done, stand up to President Biden when he's wrong and protect our Montana way of life. So not a very supportive statement of the president there. Now, meantime, the president is trying to stem any more defectors, sending Democrats this letter this morning that basically says he's not going anywhere. Meantime, on the House side, 4 senior Democrats now, Jerry Nadler, Adam Smith, Mark Takano, and Joe Morrell, have all joined 5 rank-and-file members in abandoning Joe Biden. According to Punchbowl News, they made their wishes very, very clear during that private leadership call on Sunday. Meanwhile, Congressman Quigley says he actually thinks more people are going to come forward later on this week.
We have to be honest with ourselves. It's not just the White House at stake. And all of these seats are going to be very, very closely contested. And only a handful of seats control both houses. Every vote counts. So the top of the ticket is essential, that it be very strong. And again, we're going in the opposite direction. The president has to respect that.
And Neil, Quigley actually said that he believes that the president's going to have a pretty, quote, horrible week here. But Biden supporters have been coming out one after another saying that just a few defectors like Quigley aren't going to budge the president. So more to come later on this week.
All right, Aisha, thank you for all of that, Aisha Hasni. Let's go to Peter Doocy at the White House. He didn't get a chance to ask any questions, but there were still tough questions being thrown at the White House spokesperson. Peter, what can you tell us?
Neil, we can tell you that there is still a lack of information about what exactly a neurological specialist, a Parkinson's specialist, was doing here at least 8 times in the last 8 months. That is something the New York Post and the New York Times have reported on. And things got a little testy at times in the briefing room when the press secretary would not explain who exactly this specialist was here to see.
why don't you have a cognitive test just to rule out that there are any issues? Would the president, would you counsel him to do that just to sort of put an end to these questions?
Andre, I hear you. The neurologists have said it is not warranted. The president himself, he said it today, he said it multiple times, and the doctor has said this. Everything that he does day in and day out as it relates to delivering for the American people is a cognitive test.
The White House would rather talk about the NATO summit that they're going to host tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. And despite some various reports that European allies have been concerned about President Biden's condition privately, White House officials say that hasn't made its way to the West Wing.
I think the question presupposes the notion that they need to be reassured of American leadership and President Biden's commitment, and I don't believe that's the case. We're not picking up any signs of that from our allies at all, quite the contrary. The conversations that we're having with them in advance, they're excited about this summit.
President Biden did a phone interview today, but he is remaining entirely off camera unless something changes. So for a trip to Battleground, North Carolina, they sent the First Lady.
President Biden wakes up every morning ready to work for you. That's what this election is all about. You. For all the talk out there about this race, Joe has made it clear that he's all in.
White House officials are saying President Biden is going to host a press conference on Thursday afternoon. All that they'll tell us is that it's going to be more than the traditional 2 questions when foreign leaders are in town. They are describing it at the White House as a big boy press conference. Neil.
A big boy press conference seems to imply that he's going to take more than just a couple of questions. And the pressure would be on him because it would only be him answering.
Well, one way to stop getting people to focus on him being 81 and possibly having issues with his acuity is just to call him a big boy.
Yeah, I guess so. But Peter, let me ask you something. One of the things I do see from the president of the White House is they all see how busy he is. He's never been this busy. He's never been this frenetic, keeping this pace. But this is all in response to that debate. Who's to say that this lasts if he can get through this? And he returns to form where they have these early lids, a pretty limited travel schedule. I mean, obviously a lot of people are seeing through this, not to be jaded about it, but all of this is in response to that debate, right?
It is, but I think what they are doing, based on the president's own words today, is they are looking at the last campaign where there was such a limited schedule and there were the early lids, and he still beat Trump. And so they think that they're going to be able to beat Trump again like that. But when he does this 18 minutes with Morning Joe, and White House officials insist there was no script, even though at one point he said he was reading off of a list of things Trump said, when you listen to him, he's talking a lot about the election and making it to the election and winning. He's not talking about serving out a full term. And it seems like there is a big disconnect. We would have loved to have gotten some clarity about that here at the White House, but they did not have time for us in more than an hour's worth of questions.
Yeah, I wouldn't take it personally, though, Peter. But I did have a question on this Parkinson's doctor. And I can understand they're not wanting to offer details. I guess doctors who come in and out of the White House are there to see other people. I get that. But how unusual is that for a doctor of that specialty to be making frequent visits to the White House?
That's what everybody in the briefing room was getting so testy about with the press secretary, because they were trying to find out. But what she was saying is that they can't release information because so many different people could be having an appointment with that specialist from Walter Reed here at the White House. Based on our understanding of how the system works, there are people in emergency situations who can be seen by a doctor, but it would be uncommon for somebody just to schedule, just some random staffer to schedule an appointment with a neurologist at the White House. So that's what we know about how the system is set up. We don't know still if he ever saw the president, even for one of these informal check-ins, because they won't tell us.
All right. Just wild. All right. Thank you very much for that, Peter Doocy at the White House. Just a reminder, the president, of course, will be meeting on this big military NATO powwow that's going to be at the White House. We'll be speaking to the president of Lafayette a little bit later in this show to get what he's worried about, what he wants to see, maybe what he thinks will happen as a result of this back and forth in the U.S. over the future of the commander-in-chief. In the meantime, we have Tim Ryan joining us, of course. You remember him, the 2020 presidential candidate, former Ohio Congressman. Congressman, it's great to see you. Before I get into you, sir, you're probably aware of these 9 Democrats, either on the record or 4 privately, considering that that the president of the United States not make a run for it again. Now, I raised this over the weekend, sir, with a Colorado Democrat who is campaigning for an open seat there. And he had an interesting take on all of this, the message it sends from the White House right now. I want you to respond to this.
I think it's really, really important for the sake of the country, for the president to withdraw from the race with due respect and try to figure out how we get new generational leadership in both parties. And that's what I'm hearing, again, from Southern Colorado and Western Colorado. And it's really, really frustrating to continue to hear what I'm hearing from the men and the women. I've driven 57,000 miles around for the past couple of years, and what I'm hearing out of D.C. that seems to be pretty darn insular.
You know, there are many in your party, sir, thinking that they've been hiding a lot of this, that they are well aware, including those at the White House who were quite aware of the president's cognitive issues, that they came glaringly to light for virtually all Americans, anyone watching that debate in the world. Do you think there's any culpability on their part that they are propping him up?
I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to play one literally on television, but I can just say that there's a lot of frustration that over the past many, many months, there's been a lot of hiding. That's what I'm hearing, again, from the people on the ground I'm talking to.
Congressman Ryan, thank you for your patience tonight. I just want to put in perspective, because there are others who feel the same way, but they're not coming out and saying it. And I think that is part of the sense you get from the White House. They think they can survive all of this. Do you think they can?
I think it's going to be very, very difficult. I just saw the top line on the Parkinson's doctor over at the White House 8 times in 8 months. I mean, part of the problem, I think, Neil, is that the interview obviously we saw what we saw during the debate. And then the Stephanopoulos interview, are you more frail than you were 4 years ago? And he says, no. We're all more frail than we were 4 years ago. I mean, I turned 50, and it's not a big deal, but you're in a much different, your body feels differently than it did at 45. And so he's starting to build that narrative that they're not being completely transparent about it. And he was asked that on Morning Joe this morning, and he dodged the question. And I thought Mika asked him pretty straightforwardly, have you had anybody checking on this stuff? And it was dodged, and now you get this report coming out. I just think what we saw on Thursday during the debate with our own eyes told us something. You don't have to be a neurologist. You don't have to be a doctor. You just have to be someone who, like me and like you and others, had parents or grandparents that, time wins. Time wins. And so it becomes difficult to beat this stuff back because we saw it with our own eyes.
Now, you're 50 years old. Ty's older than you, Congressman, so I know what you're saying.
I could tell some shows I've seen them.
Let me ask you, though, just about what signal this is sending, because you were part of the debate and remembered what he was like as a candidate just 4 years ago. And I've talked to some of the others, a couple of them privately, who say, no, he's not that same guy, that whatever is going on here is picking up speed. Do you agree with that?
It seems that way. Again, I'm not to steal the line, but I'm not a doctor either, but it seems that way. And I have experience in my own life with, my mom and my grandparents and people who have, aren't no longer with us. Like those years before that happens, you see a dramatic decline. And if you don't see someone every day, it looks even more stark. And we haven't seen the president around much in the last year or two, at least, those other than news junkies. And then all of a sudden he reemerges and you're like, I don't think that was the guy that I remember. And, we hear a lot about being loyal to the president, being loyal to the party. One of the big things about loyalty, Neil, is honesty. In any relationship you have, if you want to be loyal, what undergirds that loyalty is honesty and having the difficult conversations and not pretending. And I think there's a lot of Democrats, that may not be on social media, but they're out in the world and they feel like they've been betrayed to some extent as these stories start trickling out. Where was somebody a few years ago, a few months ago, and everyone was kind of pushed out of a Democratic primary. There weren't any debates. If there were debates in the Democratic primary, even if it was RFK or Marianne Williamson or Dean Phillips or whomever, we would have gotten a sense maybe of where the president's health was, and we didn't.
But early on, there were some debates, or maybe some people said that not enough. But Senator John Fetterman had heard some of the criticism you had when he was appearing on Fox earlier today, and he didn't take it very lightly. I want you to respond to what the senator said.
Let me say that I'm not sure who really gives a what Tim Ryan thinks about the situation. I know it says former, so he's not really a part of it in that conversation right now. And also from this situation, let's just focus on where we're at. It's going to be a close race here.
I wanted to give you a chance to respond to that. What did you think?
Well, I spent my entire adult life in the Democratic Party trying to push us to make sure that we, get our values out, our policies out. And I'm a citizen of the United States. I have every right to say whatever I want. And if I have a little bit of a bigger microphone than most citizens, you can bet I'm going to use it. And if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, that's not my problem. I like John Fetterman. He ran a good race. I ran a good race. He came out on top. I didn't. But I still got a voice. And what we need in this democracy are citizens that aren't afraid to speak up if they may make somebody uncomfortable. And chances are, if you're making people really uncomfortable, then you may be speaking to some truth that's out there. And I'm just not going to bury my head in the sand and pretend I didn't see what I saw on Thursday night. And I just think we've got to take another direction here so that we can win this race. And you can call me all the names you want. You can try to poke fun at me all you want. I don't get rattled. I just try to speak the truth, and the truth is a very powerful thing. And that's why a lot of Democrats are very, very concerned, and they need a voice and somebody to speak up. And really to tell someone to not speak up, to shut up, because they may say something you disagree with, like take a cognitive test. Like do town halls. Go do a Fox town hall like I did when I ran for the United States Senate. Get in a hostile environment and make your points, make your case, and prove to people. You can't read off a teleprompter. You can't read, cards from a telephone interview that you're doing and expect everyone to just kind of get in line. And then this last story that's come out about the doctor going and then not answering that question. So what do you want us to do? Like, we're seeing this with our own eyes and you're getting mad at us, and that's ridiculous. And so anyway, that's all I got to say about that.
All right. Well, there's outrage over what you said about my ties. That's starting a whole new wave of criticism, Congressman. But thank you very much. Very good seeing you again. Congressman Tim Ryan, on all of that. The fallout from all of this, from a very quiet, unusually quiet, darn near silent Donald Trump after this.
When the sawdust settles and the engine roars, the thing you care about is the job well done. But when you get your tools from Harbor Freight, something about the job feels different. Your wallet. Whatever you do it for less at Harbor Freight.
Look out, 'cause here I come. Have you always had trouble losing weight and keeping it off? Same.
Discover the power of Wegovy.
And I'm marching on to the beat I drum.
With Wegovy, I lost 35 pounds. And some lost over 46 pounds.
Wegovy.
And I'm keeping the weight off.
Wegovy helps you lose weight and keep it off. I'm reducing my risk. Wegovy is the only FDA-approved weight management medicine that's proven to reduce risk of major cardiovascular events in adults with known heart disease and with either obesity or overweight.
Wegovy shouldn't be used with semaglutide or GLP-1 medicines. Don't take Wegovy if you or your family had medullary thyroid cancer, multiple endocrine neoplasia syndrome type 2, or if allergic to it. Stop Wegovy and get medical help right away if you get a lump